Hold on. I'm not ready. I forgot my important role here. Sorry. Let's try this. Let's try the script. Okay, thank you. Well, welcome to the, hard to believe, September 6th meeting of the San Luis Coastal Unified School District Board of Trustees. At this time, we'd like to ask those of you in attendance to please keep your videos off and your audio muted unless you're presenting information or speaking in public comment. We're offering translation services for our Spanish-speaking attendees. To access translation, please click on the globe at the bottom of your screen and then the language. At this time, we'd like to ask if anyone who might need translation would please click on the participants icon at the bottom of your screen and raise your hand.
Hola, buenas tardes, bienvenidos a esta junta. Vamos a tener servicios de interpretación que están disponibles como siempre haciendo clic en el globo terráqueo que aparece en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Pero nos gustaría que de momento levantaran la mano en la sección de participantes para asegurarnos de que hay alguien que está escuchándonos y si es que no existe, de esa manera no gastar nuestras voces. Gracias, bienvenidos.
Thank you. So the board did meet in closed session. We talked about anticipated litigation, five cases. And then we had a personnel issue where we reviewed and took possible action on employment, dismissal, or discipline of a district employee. Is there a consensus on the order of business? Okay, let's move on to 6.01, our student representatives to the board. We want to welcome some student representatives to the board. I'm going to start with Morro Bay High, my son's alma mater. And so we have two people from Morro Bay tonight. We have Alana Sachs and Michaela Avila. How do you prefer that we pronounce it? Okay. Why don't you come on up and introduce yourselves? And if you would, just maybe tell us a little bit about yourself. And then we'd love to hear your report.
Okay, where should we stay?
You guys are perfect. The only thing we want to make sure that we hear you. So you can move the mic around if you want, it's fine, whatever works for you guys.
Okay.
That's it. Perfect. And then I don't know if you can see yourselves, but you're over there, so you should be good. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'm Sachs. I'm a senior and we're co-presidents at Morro Bay. I do water polo and swim, so it's currently my water polo season, so sometimes you'll see both of us. Right now you might see more of her, and then during her basketball season you'll see more of me. Sorry.
It's okay.
And we're both in ASB, we both do student senate. And yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Michaela Avila. I play basketball, obviously co-president. We've both been doing ASB for 4 years and student senate for like 5, 6. So we're pretty involved, I'd say. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Go ahead. And then the board afterwards might have some questions for you too, just about events and stuff like that.
Okay. So first off, we want to take a moment to share some of our new staff at Morro Bay. So we have our new assistant principals, Mr. Benjamin Davis and Mr. Will Wallace, our athletic director, Tyler Hoyt, and activities director, Miss Van Zee, who is taking over after several years of leadership from Miss Whiteson. And we also welcomed a new school counselor, Miss Dexter, who will join Miss Smith in the guidance office. And we have a new registrar, Judy Stagnoli, and 4 new teachers. In our English class, we have Miss Sherry in history, Mr. Jones, and in physical education, we have Mr. Bennett, who is also our tennis coach, and Mr. Doherty, who is our new head football coach. Our freshman and new student orientation was wonderful. All new students at Morro Bay High School got a swag bag with a notebook and a t-shirt. Our ASB class led tours, games like Hungry Hippos, and an eventful rally that the students got pumped up for the school year at. We also had a rally our second week of school, and we had a donut on a string eating contest, as well as a basketball competition between the new assistant principals while students threw dodgeballs at them. And to end a rally, one of our seniors tied Mr. Scaldi in the face. So that was also really eventful and fun. Back to school night was well attended last Thursday evening. It was great to have parents on campus. Thank you to Dr. Prater and Marilyn Rogers for attending. For some of our sports updates, girls volleyball had a strong start with 45 athletes playing varsity, junior varsity, and a freshman team. And we recently hosted Los Osos Middle School at our home volleyball game last Tuesday. Our football team is also off to a great start, and we are excited to be hosting a youth night this Friday, which includes all kids under the ages of 14 get in for free. And we have like footballs that we're going to throw out to them. And as for like our school theme, like we do some themes at our football game. So we're just going with school colors. And then from like 6:30 to 7:15, we're doing like face paint and giving out like accessories and whatnot to just amp the spirit. And then both boys and girls water polo have played well in preseason matches, and we're looking forward to league play in the weeks to come. And our boys team will also be hosting a tournament at Morro Bay this Saturday, and the girls team's undefeated so far. And cross country opened their season last Saturday in AG, and they will be hosting a race at Morro Bay this weekend with over 20 high schools attending, and middle school races will follow in the afternoon. Our girls golf has one of the largest rosters we've ever had. Same with girls tennis. For girls golf, we have 25 golfers. And for girls tennis, we have 27 members of the varsity and JV teams combined. We kicked off work school-wide last week on our student values statement, and the process continues now. And I remember presenting it to the board last year. Jackson and Neil and I, talked about what we were going to do to create a better environment at our school. And so this value statement's kind of like an extension of that and how we're, working to end hate speech at our school. Along with our value statement, students at our school pushed to change and remodel our dress code. And Michaela and I are currently working on revising our dress code in collaboration with our staff and students at our school. Club Rush is this Friday, so all students will get an opportunity to find a club that meets their interests. No, it's only okay. We're excited to be involved in opening our campus on September 17th from 2 to 4 p.m. To give tours of our school. Most everyone knows about our new pool, but we have many new remodeled facilities courtesy of Measure D that we will show off that day. So Suicide Prevention Week is this week, and we will have activities coordinated by our school counseling team and our philanthropy branch of ASB. September 10th is World Suicide Prevention Day. And in light of that, our school will be putting on events each Thursday during the month of September to raise awareness of the issue and to promote a conversation about mental health. And to show your support of mental health and suicide prevention, students are encouraged to wear the color yellow. And if students don't have anything yellow, they can always stop by the front gate to show their support and they can grab something yellow to wear. We are very excited about our home football game this Friday against Fresno. Our first home game was extremely well attended and the student section was very, very hype. And it was great to have such cool spirit and our seniors leading some chants. And that's all the information we have for today.
So, thank you. So I will tell you, and Atticus, this is for you too. You are always welcome to stay at our meetings now. We understand that you may have homework and other things, and sometimes our meetings sort of drag on. However, your student voice is really valued by us. And if you look at the agenda and there are issues that you feel that the board needs to hear about, we really want to hear from you when we invite your participation. So please know that you're welcome to be here or leave if that's what you'd like to do too. So thank you. Thank you very much for the information. Any questions for any board members? Great.
Mr. Hunger?
Yes, sir.
I just have a clarifying question. Did I hear this rumor correctly that Morro Bay High's girls water polo team beat San Luis High's water polo team?
Yes, we did.
Oh, it's not a rumor. It's
So-
confirmed.
Yeah.
Hey,
Yeah, probably something like that. It was, yeah.
hey, I was just clarifying the rumor. That's all. Nice job, Alana.
Thank
Not
you.
that Mr. Scaldi's counting or anything like that. Well, thank you very much. Congratulations.
Yeah.
Yes, and we really look forward to seeing you this year. Okay,
Thank you.
Hey, Atticus, you're up.
Hey everyone, thank you for having me.
And you can adjust that mic if you want to.
So I was thinking. So yeah, I'm Atticus Fenton. I'm this year's ASB president. And what I have basically for you guys is just a slideshow kind of highlighting the big events that we've had going on in our school so far this year, first couple of weeks and what happened prior before we started school. So no, you're all good. No problem.
Atticus, while we're waiting, where did you go to elementary and middle school?
I went to Pacheco Elementary School. Shout out Mr. Mayfield over there, and Laguna Middle School. Yeah.
Great.
Oh, and Mr. Calendar over there.
Yolanda's
Sorry.
hanging out over there.
Sorry about that, guys.
So I'm curious, what are you specifically interested in studying and things like that?
Studying, I'm really interested in business, marketing. I feel like I'm really passionate about selling things or convincing people of ideas that I'm passionate about. So I feel like anywhere in the realm of that would be good. I'm kind of still figuring it out. But overall, just really excited to move on to the next step. If anything, I can just go. Yeah, no, it's no problem. All right, so I think the first thing I was planning on talking about was our Link Crew 9th grade freshman orientation, which was basically about a week before school. We had all of the 9th graders on campus at once for our Link Crew orientation. And what that entailed was different groups of 9th graders, each with 2 student leaders. And those student leaders would run them through kind of get to know you games, icebreakers, but also help them feel more comfortable about being at school. And it became really apparent as it went on that there were a lot of unanswered questions that the 9th graders had, and there's a lot of stress built up, and many of them just had a lot of questions about us. So it was a really great opportunity for us to know some new people on campus and for them to have some upperclassmen friends that they could look forward to. And yeah, it was really just a great opportunity to kind of welcome the future, so to speak. We also had a foreign exchange lunch, or not a foreign exchange lunch, rather a new student lunch, which was mainly foreign exchange students, but a lot of new students from other towns, other schools. And it was a great experience to kind of meet new people and especially make people feel a lot more welcome on our campus. And we just got a lot of pizza and went into the small gym and sat at different tables and had a little mixer. And it was really great. I feel like I have a lot of familiar faces that I look forwards to on campus when I see them in the hallways. So also a really great experience. What else do we have? Our Intramural Dodgeball tournament, which has a really special place in my heart because I was a commissioner of lunchtime activities last year for the ASB, and it's really cool to see how the new guys are turning around and making it their own. We have about like 30 teams signed up, which is really great. And the thing that I love about the tournament and that I saw last year was the sense of community that it brings, because whenever you have anyone or everyone on the campus in one place at once, it makes the place feel alive and the community really strong. And we had our championship dodgeball match last year where everyone was at the gym at once, and it was super loud and the spirit was super loud in there. And it was just overall a really great time. So really excited to see what our dodgeball tournament looks like this year and all the other tournaments we do. No, you're fine. So that was also one of the highlights that we have coming up soon. And then on to like the bigger stuff, we had our first rally of the year last Friday. It was our back to school rally, and it was to get everyone really excited for being back to school and excited for the football game that night. And we were extremely nervous beforehand. We were kind of working out a lot of technical difficulties, weren't really sure how it was going to go, but it really exceeded our expectations. We had a great time. Everyone was super loud, super spirited, super involved. We had a lot of crowd participation and some really fun games too. We did a table surfing game where we had all 4 classes with 10 volunteers and one person sitting on top of a table that was on top of 10 people, and they had to roll the table across the gym floor. And the first one without any hands, and the first one to do it wins. And it was really funny. Everyone was dying laughing. It was overall just a great rally. And yeah, I feel like everyone thought it went well. And that's all you really want from people. My friend Anna, one of the senior class officers, afterwards said she heard a freshman say, "That was really corny, but it was a lot of fun." And I feel like as an ASB class, that's a really good compliment to get. So the rally went really successfully. And then later that night, our football game, we played our rival AG and we got killed. But the student section, the entire time, all 4 quarters, was super into it, super spirited. We had everyone leading chants and singing the songs that the DJ was playing, and we would be loud if we got a single yard or a single first down. Even though at the end we didn't really come out with the victory we wanted. And it was just really felt great to be in the stadium again, the whole field, and the way it was redone with the scoreboard and the lights shining, and overall just kind of felt like home again, playing home games. And I haven't really been to one since freshman year, but it was definitely the best one that I'd ever been to. And we lost by like 20. So yeah, the football game was amazing. And we did a blackout theme, and we're planning on doing different themes for each football game, just because we feel like it makes people want to go and breathes that sense of spirit and community that we pretty much look for. That's pretty much our mission statement for ASB. So yeah, the football game was also a great experience. Other things we have coming up, Club Rush is September 14th at lunch. And honestly, everyone in our class and most people at school just feel like when you have a reason to come to school outside of the classroom, whether that be a club, a sport, even the Intramural Dodgeball tournament, if you're coming to school for any reason outside of the classroom, it makes the hard parts of school seem a lot easier. The days go by a lot faster, and overall just make your experience more worthwhile. So we're looking forward for everyone to join clubs this year. We have a lot of great clubs coming up, and it's pretty much I have all that I have for you guys. I wish I could show the pictures for the football game and the rally, but thank you so much for having me. And before I forget,
Thank you. I'm sorry. Oh, thank you.
We have our Tiger Nation t-shirts. These are given to everyone on campus, and they're really good. We had to just promote spirit. We had everyone at the football game wearing them. So I'll leave the box with you guys.
You.
And yeah,
Cool. And we're sorry. I see there's an issue with sharing the screens as I understand it. So we apologize for that, but we'll work on it and make it better. So
And Atticus, if you could share that, you have, my assistant has it. And so
Yeah.
I'll make sure the board sees your presentation in Friday update to the
Okay.
board.
thank you.
All right.
Again,
So-
as I encouraged Alana and Michaela, if you've got issues that you think are important that are a part of our agenda, we really invite you to stay, and we invite your feedback, because the student voice is really important to us. Just, we do listen to what you guys have to say. We particularly, we talk about the Student Senate and the importance of the Student Senate and the voices from the Student Senate in terms of decisions that we make are really important to us. So please feel free to stay, to go. But if you have things that you think we need to know, please know that we'll be receptive to those.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all for having me.
Thanks. Thank you. So we have 6.02 Sunsimer program highlights. And I think that this is a slide presentation, and I'm not sure how that's working right now. Somebody give me an.
Yeah, maybe Mrs. Miller from Intramural Elementary will have better luck sharing from home. I'm not sure. Mrs. Miller, you there?
I am here. I will try to share my screen with everybody and see if that works.
Thanks, Jessica.
I actually don't know that I have access to do that. Oh, it just popped up. Here we go.
Thank you, Jessica. Great.
Oops.
We'll get there.
All right. Can everyone see that? Okay. So hello, thanks for having me, and thanks for accommodating on Zoom. I really appreciate it. I'm Jessica Miller, and I am the principal at Sunsimer Elementary School. This is my second year there, and I'm really excited for a full year with less COVID guidelines and some really exciting things happening on campus. So this year, our school-wide focus is connection and growth. And so everything that we're doing on campus is really centered around those two things: connection with our community, connection with our students, connection with our teachers, and making sure that our focus is on student growth in all areas. So not just academics, but SEL as well. And then our school-wide goals, something that we're talking about in all of our meetings and making sure that our teachers are constantly coming back to is that all of our students this year are going to make more than a year's growth in a year's time. This is something that came about because of some focus on our data from last year and past years. We definitely have some subgroups that weren't making as much growth as we wanted to see. And we also had some really high achieving students who were pretty stagnant with their growth. And so we wanted to make sure that all of our students were making growth and showing growth throughout the year, and that they were all being supported academically while at Sinsheimer. So we are going to do this with our Sinsheimer Stinger. SOAR is going to be like our acronym that we use throughout the year. And it's kind of our MTSS umbrella. So multi-tiered systems of support. And we're looking at, I'm going to forget what SOAR stands for. So I'm going to escape really fast because we just implemented this. Oh, and see, now I'm going backwards. And look at my notes. There we go. Safety, ownership, achievement, and respect. And so that kind of folds into everything that we're going to be doing with our SEL programs on campus, having our full-time counselor, as well as our focus on academics this year. So academic supports, I'm sure all of you have heard of Win Time. We're continuing that, and we're really diversifying the interventions that we're putting into place on campus this year and making sure that our students' needs are being targeted and met. And then we're going to implement progress monitoring, especially in our classrooms this year, checking in on our student progress throughout the year and those small group kind of data tracking pieces, just to make sure that what we're doing with our students is actually showing progress and it's actually showing growth for them. We'll have, varied interventions, data tracking. We have an MTSS team on campus this year, and they'll be looking at a lot of those trends and a lot of that data to figure out, where are our holes, what are the things we need to work on as an entire staff, what are some things we need to focus on, and then really thinking about that student goal setting piece and how we can tie that into student ownership and student ownership over their own growth. And then of course, continuing to use our accelerated reader as well to tie into that student goal setting piece too. Just a few of our SEL supports. The list is very, very long, but these are some of the things that we're doing to support our students and their social emotional learning while on campus. So we have mindfulness practices in our daily announcements. We're going to continue with check-in, check-out. So it's a system we put into place last year where our students, some of our most needy students, can check in with an adult at the beginning of the day and kind of set a goal for the day and talk about how they think their day is going to go. And then they check in with that same adult in the afternoon and talk about, how things went. Did you meet your goal? Did you, do what you had expected yourself to do? And if not, what are we going to do differently next time? We have a full-time counselor on campus, which I can't even begin to tell you how amazing that's been. Even just the last 3 weeks of school, it has been so powerful and impactful for our students. I can finally say, I think a lot of our student social emotional needs are being met, or at least being listened to at this point because we have that full-time counselor. So that's been huge. We also have a recess coach this year. She was our SEB monitor last year, social emotional behavior support on campus. And we actually hired her back on this year as an instructional assistant. And so she kind of plays a few different roles. She'll be running some intervention groups, but she's also leading our kind of recess and lunch, force to make sure that students feel safe out on the yard. They know who to go to when they're out on the yard. And she's also data tracking all of our recess and lunch incidents that we have on the yard. And so she's providing structured activities for students who struggle more with that unstructured time, and really guiding them through some of those activities to support social emotional development and turn taking and game playing and all of those things that we want our students to really thrive in, especially in that unstructured time. We also are working on an SEL referral form to our MTSS team. So instead of just having, a few different the student can go to counseling or the student can go to check-in, check-out, really having that MTSS team look at that whole child and figure out what are the best supports for the student and how can we as a team really figure out what pieces are going to be most beneficial to them. So I think just having that team in place is going to be really beneficial this year too. We have with our full-time counselor and our new librarian this year, they've put together monthly themed school-wide read alouds. with guiding questions that go along with those. So our counselor started that this week actually, and is getting into classrooms and starting those read alouds with some of our students. So that's been really exciting. Second step curriculum is continuing from last year as well. And we also have our full-time counselor support for that, which has been great. So some of our teachers have started to teach lessons, and she's been able to pop in and give tips and tricks and supports while that's going on in the classroom too. Now with kind of lessened COVID guidelines, we have buddy classes back again. And so some of our older grades are partnered with our lower grades and are able to do activities together, really building community on campus. And then we also have some school-wide incentives, Golden Trash Can, which is like a keep campus clean incentive. So the class that cleans up the best after lunch for a certain week earns a golden trash can that we were able to 3D print in our innovation lab last year. So that's been a fun kind of competition between classes. And then our Stinger Spirit Fridays as well, where classes dress in spirit colors or spirit gear for Fridays. And then our student council goes around and figures out which class has the highest percentage, and they get to keep part of our bee mascot in their classroom for the following week because they won. So all of those fun things happening. Here's some examples of our Stinger Spirit on campus. And some of the other things happening on campus this year to support our academic growth and SEL growth, our athletics. We have lots of after school clubs happening. So these are just some examples of the after school clubs that happened. We also have, as I was mentioning before, those guided activities during lunch. We also have activity carts that come out on certain days during the week. So students who don't want to necessarily go out and play, a game like Foursquare or handball can choose to come hang out and draw or play a board game with friends instead. And then we have youth athletics getting started next week, September 13th, with our 5th and 6th graders, which we're really, really excited about. We've got flag football, cross country, and girls volleyball starting for our fall season, and have some really fun events planned for them as well. This year too, something new that we introduced, our students voted on a school motto. So be kind, be awesome, be you is our school motto this year. And so we're kind of integrating that into everything we do too, along with our Stinger expectations, to take care of yourself, take care of others, and take care of this place. So that is all I have for you, unless anyone has any questions, but I'll leave you with some fun pictures from our first few weeks of school.
Questions for board members?
I do have.
Yeah, Dr. Reisendrath Rogers.
Wow, that was a very comprehensive report. Thank you so much. I learned a lot. I also was just interested in specifically the mindfulness practices, and I was wondering if you could share with us what that's like, if that's in a classroom, or those are one-on-one, or tell us a little bit about.
Yeah, great question. Sorry, my dog is barking in the background here, so I apologize if you hear her. But last year we actually hired a mindfulness consultant to come in, and she did 8 lessons with every single one of our classes, teaching them mindfulness techniques. She wasn't available to come back this year, so we're continuing those in our daily announcements every morning. And so every morning, one of our 5th or 6th graders announces a mindfulness practice and guides our students in walking through that together as a whole school. And then it's something that our teachers can refer back to, like, oh, it looks like we might need to stop and take a shark's breath right now. Everybody breathe in and breathe out. So it's something our teachers use as well as they go through it.
Anybody else? I just want to say I'm impressed with the Golden Trash Can Award. And first of all, of course, keeping your campus clean and engendering a sense of pride among your students, but that you're using the I Innovate Lab to create a 3D award that you can give to the students. I think that's a great idea, and a practical use of the really wonderful I Innovate Labs and things like that our foundation has helped. So thank you, Jessica.
Yeah, big thanks to Katie Peters and our lab rats for getting that 3D printed last year, because I would not have been able to figure it out.
That's great. Well, thank you. Any other questions from Mrs. Frame?
Thank you, Jessica. Is this working? I have just a quick question. It was a great presentation. I'm excited for the opportunities for after school, these activities that you guys have. How do you guys determine, what activities to offer, who's running the groups? I mean, it's a pretty comprehensive kind of program you have and lots of opportunities for kids. So could you tell me?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we started this last year. And to be completely honest, it was kind of student started. So I had students come up to me during lunch one day and they're like, hey, we want to start an art club. And so it took off from there and I was able to reach out to PTA, and we've been working with parents and students and community members to kind of start what students are interested in. So we had a bunch of skateboard decks donated last year, and we were able to hold a skateboard club with like 50 students in it, and they put together their own skateboards and then learned how to ride them. And we had guest speakers come and all of that. So all of our clubs right now, our after school clubs, are all either teacher sponsored and run, or parent sponsored or community member sponsored and run. And it's something that our PTA really has head up or taken on to get going. And then we also have a few lunchtime clubs that students have started with the support of staff members. So they find a staff member to be their like adult to help them run it, and the students make the agenda and they determine what's going to happen each meeting. So like our anime club was a student run club, and they designed little anime cartoons that they created and then had some time to talk about anime. So it's a mix, but definitely a big undertaking, and it probably would not be possible without my amazing PTA as well.
Well, I appreciate that, because it sounds like there's a depth and breadth of opportunities for kids to kind of discover different things that they perhaps wouldn't necessarily be able to do in the classroom. So thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you. Anything else? Well, thanks again, Jessica. We really appreciate it. And we look forward to hearing more of what's going on at Sensheimer, and good luck on what I think is going to be a great school year. So thank you.
Thank you.
Right. 7.01 correspondence. The board did not receive any correspondence at the time of the publication of the agenda. 7.02 public comment. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address the board? Okay, seeing none from here. Mrs. Dawson, do we have anyone who wants to address the board on via Zoom? I'm sorry, what? Someone has raised their hand? Oh, please raise, sorry, please raise your hand if you wish to address the board via Zoom public comment. Okay, seeing no one, we'll go to 8.01 business and budget update. Mr. Pinkerton.
Yeah, just a couple of quick things for the board. I wanted to just give a quick shout out to HR and the fiscal department to start. Beginning of the school year, teachers ramp up, kids are back, all those types of things. But I mean, it has been an absolute hectic summer. I think, Mr. Block and his team got all the teaching positions filled right to start the school year, just kicking things off. And it makes such a big difference with the effort that they put forward. Of course, unaudited actuals are tonight. So the fiscal department for the past month, that's all they've done, right? Is basically closing the books, balancing things out. We'll be sharing that information as well. So sometimes those, behind the scenes things that help make us run are super important. So I just wanted to give them a quick shout out. Also let the board know, I spoke briefly at one of the first board meetings about just safety and our focus on safety this year. We of course have Resolute and Associates working with each of our school sites to go through and review their lockdown plans, intruder drills, evacuations, all of those things. And so they've kicked off. So they just did loans last week. I got to attend both meetings. So they're starting off with meeting with the administrators first. Then they're going to be, then they meet with the staff afterwards. And then of course, they're going to come back, do an actual drill on campus, and then share those results and talk about it. So that's something they'll be hitting every single one of our school sites over the course of the year. And we're focusing on secondary just to start, but again, all scheduled all throughout the year. And so it really was a very thorough process to go through, discuss, talk about it. We are going to be, prior to the drills, sharing that information with parents and the communications. Resolute is helping with those communications. It's these times right now, and again, still Uvalde every day. It seems like in the media, on TV, those types of things. It's really on our parents' minds. It's on our staff's minds, and so the more we can be prepared and make them feel prepared, I think will definitely help.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Pinkerton? Okay, Mrs. Frost, Educational Services Update.
Yes, just a couple of updates for you this evening. I'm starting with our iInnovate labs, which our principal from Sinsheimer talked about as well. They are open. We have students using those labs already starting last week. You might remember that we hired 2 instructional assistants who are highly trained to work in the labs. Mr. Torres and Mrs. Jefferson are working with our students, partnering with teachers, making sure we get our kids in the lab. All of our kids, elementary, will have at least 8 sessions throughout the year in the lab. But that isn't the minimum. Their classroom teachers can take them into the lab as well. We have 50 plus LED teachers. Those are also experts in the lab who go into the lab. So 8 is a minimum, but we know that many of our students will get far more than 8 times in our iInnovate labs. Next thing, talking about academic intervention teachers. You might remember that these are our ground floor educators who are working with our kids in the MTS system, right? MTSS system. When we identify the kids who have need in certain academic areas, they are working with them in small groups. They went through 2 full days of training a couple of weeks ago. We have been using LLI very consistently, but we've added new curriculum this year. They were trained in the Sunday system and also in Bridge the Gap, both looking at phonemic awareness, really targeting those reading skills that our youngest and neediest learners need. And then finally, last thing today, we welcomed Rosa Molina to San Luis Coastal. She's a consultant in the area of dual language immersion. Mrs. Molina comes from the Bay Area. She has tremendous experience in the way of dual language immersion. She works through California, throughout the Western states as well. She will be working with both Pacheco and Baywood as we refine our practices. And today she started with both schools. She observed on both campuses, worked with the principals, met the teachers, saw the kids throughout the campuses as well. So we really look forward to working with her throughout the year as well.
Okay. And then Mr. Pinkerton, back to you for Measure D update.
Yeah, I'm going to share with the board, as well as with the public, as well as with our parents and staff. We have our first of many visitations for San Luis Obispo High School and Morro Bay High School to see the Measure D project. So we want to open those campuses up. We want the public, even though there's still a couple of projects left at both sites. We just felt like it was a good time to kind of, again, start the process of bringing people on. So on September 17th, we'll have our first kind of open door campus walk. And so it'll be San Luis Obispo High School from 10 to 12. And again, I'll send this out. I'm going to put it in the communications. We're going to put it in the paper. But we'll every 20 minutes, starting at 10 a.m. till 12 o'clock till noon, we'll be doing guided tours. So I've asked both sites to have a couple of students lead those tours, along with, we'll have one of the BGT staff to open up the doors, go through, but basically kind of walk the entire campus. San Luis Obispo High School again every 20 minutes, and then we will do Morro Bay High School from 2 to 4. So the same thing every 20 minutes and kind of walk people through. It may be we might get a sneak peek at the upcoming theater and multi-purpose room and kitchen, as well as at San Luis Obispo. We have the library area, the classrooms, and multi-purpose room kitchen there too. Maybe some of the current construction that should be done, both projects in January. So again, just we'll hopefully get some good turnout this coming on the 17th, but we'll do this, from now through the next year as the projects unfold. And, we will have a final, when everything's done, wrapped up, we'll have a big celebration for Measure D and really the investment that our taxpayers have put into our schools, I think is very important. The other thing we just posted online is we had an architect do a TK case study. So looking at each of our school sites for the new transitional kindergarten needs. A TKK class is not your average 960. They need more space. So really looking at a 1350 to 1500 square foot, for those kids, it's you students who really should have a bathroom in the classroom, right? And so that's something that, again, we've analyzed each of the schools, knowing that we're going to have another 8 to 9 TK classrooms added to our district next year. Having that infrastructure, having that plan ready to go is very important. So again, that is online. I'll share with the board Friday notes. I'm also going to be sharing with our staff and our parents as well. I've asked the principals to take that plan, kind of look at it with our students, or not with our students, but with our staff. And with our parents at PTA meetings, kind of get their input, get tie-in. Again, this is a 30,000 level foot, right? In terms of the number of classrooms we have, where they could be located, adding shade to the playgrounds, right? Lots of things like that kind of tie into the plan. And then lastly, along with the TKK plan, Gary has just also finished kind of a look at all of the fencing at all of our campuses right now, safety fencing. And so I will be going over that plan with him probably tomorrow with Mr. Bonin, our director of BG&T, and we'll be sharing that with the board as well as at a public meeting, kind of discuss, the future of safety fencing, because it's, for the most part, 90% of the parents very well received, very happy. We're putting temporary fencing up, doing those types of things, but we've had a few parents call that are concerned just about, how do kids get out and just things like that come up, right? And so I've had those conversations with them, talk to them, and so I think it will be good to, again, analyze that plan, look at it, and move forward as we can. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Pinkerton? Mrs. Frame.
Mr. Pinkerton, thanks. Quick question about, it's difficult to project enrollment for, how are we, based on predictions that you had for this year, we're pretty close on what you're predicting for a kindergarten enrollment or TK enrollment?
Yeah.
Okay. Great.
Yeah. Pretty stable, right? I mean, overall, I think that our we did our 10-year
Right.
demographic report. We're 75, 60, 7,600 kids right in that realm, right? In terms of students, but that's with TK additions, right? I mean, we have added several TK classes this year, and then TK will kind of be that bump in terms of next year as well. And then we'll see, as time goes by, if we start to get some of the students that maybe left San Luis Coastal with the pandemic, other programs, if they'll return to us or not. See how that goes.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Pinkerton, I think that I saw a new fence at Del Mar in the front, and then also it looked like there was preparation for construction of the fence at Monarch Grove. I haven't seen Pacheco. Can you just sort of update me on that?
So so Del Mar, I believe most of the fence is up. Again, temporary fencing right now. So that's part of the plan with Measure C, should it pass, would be to put, kind of ornamental fencing along those areas, fix the front of campus up. But there's a lot of ADA work that needs to be done when you put a fence in like that. And so you'll see right now, even with the temp fence, there's 3 different classroom doors that lead straight to the outside that have to remain locked during the day. Well, that's not ideal. We would want those to be within the fence, right? But that's going to mean pushing the sidewalk out. That's going to, there's just a lot that goes into a permanent long-term fence. But again, temporary fences up all around the entire campus, right at Del Mar. They've begun to add the block to Monarch Grove along the back, finishing that up to make it higher. We'll be extending the other fence 6 feet, as well as looking at the kindergarten playground. They have a short gate there on that side that we'll be extending. The fencing around Pacheco has been ordered. Some of that will be permanent in that, kind of the fencing along the field section will just be a permanent higher fence with gates. Right now, no gates. And then we'll have temporary fencing, which will encompass the rest of the campus. For now, again, some of the same issues at Del Mar. That school in particular on the north end has major ADA accessibility issues that have to be addressed. And so that's something that needs, I mean, those are major dollars that will go into that particular project, but that's moving forward. So that should be, you should be starting to see that work very soon in the next month or so. That they have to go out and order it, supplies, move forward. Pacheco's probably our biggest, temporary fence plan in terms of moving forward. And then also looking at Los Ranchos along kind of the kindergarten playground there in the front, right? To extend that up right now, it's really short. So extend that 6 feet, fix the gate there. What happens too is like at Los Ranchos, you begin to have some issues when you put up a fence with access, where kids could freely go before. Now they may have to go through the office to get to a location. So those are things that we have to work out, find another plan for. So Los Ranchos was one of those schools where the TKK kids used to just be able to walk right to the front of school and go to the secretary. Well, now they can't. So we're going to try to extend that fence out so that the kids do have an access to the office area there. Mr. Buckman.
I did look for a joke.
Mhm.
A fence along the highway back there. I don't know. I'll find out.
I looked at it, I right after the
I
touch base. It's 6 foot.
It is.
It is 6 foot fence. Yeah,
from the-
it's high.
Great. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions for Mr. Pinkerton? Right, let's move to item 9.01, resolution number 02223, GAN limit calculations for the 21-22 and estimated calculations for 22-23. Mr. Pinkerton and Mrs. Eklund.
I'm going to have Mrs. Eklund do it.
Aha.
This is always the funnest. This is the funnest presentation of the year, of course.
And nobody, and even if you explain it to us, people still don't understand.
So every year you have to approve the GAN limit. And we do a GAN limit based on all of our expenditures and ADA throughout the year. It's a form that's filled out in our state accounting software. We take that GAN limit, we send it to the COE. They add all of the district's GAN limits to their GAN limit, and then that goes up to the state. And the state gets this from several different agencies, probably libraries, school districts, and there's one other organization where they get a GAN limit, and that determines the state's GAN limit, which is intended to constrain their yearly spending by linking year-to-year changes in expenditures to changes in inflation and population. And this was passed a proposition in 1979, and it's required that we do it every year. We have a GAN limit. This for 2021, we spent 14,000 more than our GAN limit calculation allowed. So the state emailed and asked us to make an adjustment to lower the current year by $14,000. It doesn't mean less money is allocated to us. We don't have to give that money back. It's just adjusting our GAN limit in accordance to inflation in our population, which is ADA in a school district.
There was a time a few years ago when I would give this presentation that I would tell you that we would never reach the GAN limit. Guess what? We've reached the GAN limit. And so it's 2 years in a row. So it's just that just shows you the amount of revenues that have come into the state of California over the past few years, and in terms of this and spending as well. So so this is a little bit out of the norm than what we've normally seen.
Will we see changes, do you think, due to the rate of inflation?
I honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
I can't. Let me see if I printed an article from school services. Let me see what they say real quick. No, they don't really talk about inflation in the article.
Questions from the board? No one? Is there anybody from the public that would like to address the board on this resolution? Raise your hand, please, and on Zoom or if you're here. Okay. Seeing no one, I'll bring it back to the board. Would someone like to make a motion for to approve resolution number 02223, our GAN limit calculations? Mrs. Frame? Okay.
Yes, I'll make a.
Eve, you seconded? Okay. Just a second here.
Someone.
Okay, Mrs. Frame.
I'll make a motion to approve resolution number 022223.
Okay, and then I think Ms. Dobler Drew seconded that. Is there any further discussion from the board on this item? Seeing none, I'll bring it back for a vote. Mrs. Frame, Ms. Dobler Drew, Mr. Buckman, Dr. Eisenrath Rogers, Mrs. Roger, Mrs. Sheffer, and I'm a yes. Motion carries 7-0. 10.01, counseling across the district, and Mrs. Gould, Ms. Gould, sorry.
Good evening. Give me just a moment to pull up our presentation. Sorry, I have to snooze and install. Okay, good evening. I'm Janet Gould, Executive Director of Student Support Services, and I have with me this evening Principal on Special Assignment John Calandro and District Lead Counselor Angela Riles. And we are excited to present to you tonight the counseling update across our district, which is aligned with our strategic direction on student wellness and continuing to strengthen our targeted system of counseling supports to support the social and emotional needs of students across our district, as well as student safety. So we had our first joint counselors meeting earlier this year with our expanded group of counselors due to some increases. Thank you very much, board, that were approved at the end of last year. And Dr. Prater and Diane Frost came in for a very engaging conversation with our counselors. This year, we have 7 high school counselors, up from 6.8. We were able to increase our dual enrollment Questa liaison from a 0.8 to a 1.0 this year. We have 3.8 middle school counselors with the addition of a new CTE counselor that we'll talk about this evening. 9.4 elementary counselors as we move to full-time counselors at all of our comprehensive elementary schools and 2 days a week at Teach. And the amazing Shelley Benson has returned to SLO High as their counselor. Very excited to have her back. And we're fortunate to be able to keep some district lead counseling support through Angela Riles. And 2 days a week, she is supporting that important work. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Angela.
Hi, everyone. Well, you could see in that last picture that we did meet as an entire counseling team, which doesn't happen often for our crew. Getting everybody off site is always a little more challenging than it sounds. I know many of you know that as well. But what we did when we got together was we did a little team building, and Dr. Prater and Ms. Frost were able to see part of it. But we broke into groups with various levels of counselors in each group, and we asked them to create a kind of combined resume. We asked each group to talk about what their experience was, what their credentials and trainings were. And we asked them to create one collective resume for their group. And you can see in the photos here, we had quite a variety of experiences and opportunities. And so I took all of those and made kind of our counseling team collective resume here for us. And just to highlight a few things within that room, in the last picture, there's over 400 years. That's over 20 years average per person. And some of those people in that room were in their very first year of experience as school counselors, and some of them were in their 37th year of experience. You can see we have a variety of levels that we've worked at, degrees that we have, credentials that we possess, trainings that we've been to, things like trauma-informed care, crisis, drug and alcohol trainings, Leader in Me. The list goes on and on. I couldn't include it all here. And then lastly, I asked the staff to really discuss their passions for student learning. These were some of the words that they used: belonging, trusting, learning, problem solving. These are the things that our amazing new group of 20 counselors was able to share as the strength of the team that we're working with. And what is this team working on? Okay, so what we're working on is building strong, independent, well, healthy, contributing members of our world, right? That's what we're all doing in education. And as a counseling team, we feel the best way to do this is through social emotional learning. And so the last few years, our team has really leaned into this graphic, which has been provided to us by CASEL, the Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning. I never say it right. And CASEL is kind of one of the leading contributors in social emotional learning. They're doing a lot of the research right now behind that, giving us a lot of the information that we need on what is important and essential as we talk about what social emotional learning is and means. And this graphic really gives us that definition for us as a counseling team. We see in the middle here 5 pieces of the pie, and we feel like that pie is really what makes students, again, that well, healthy, contributing member to our world. And those pieces are really self-awareness, self-management, responsible decision-making, relationship skills, and social awareness. And we take a minute and really think about those 5 competencies, as Castle calls them. Those are the things we want our students to have and to really possess and feel confident about as they become real social managers of the world that we're living in today. And what we also like about this graphic a lot is outside of those pieces of the pie are these concentric circles. And these circles are really the environment that social emotional learning is taught through, right? And we have some great influence over some of those circles, and we don't have as much influence over some of those circles. And so our goal as school counselors is to really implement the influences we can in classrooms and in schools, and then to help assist our families, caregivers, and our communities in implementing these important pieces of the pie as we develop these students for the world we're living in. So that's what we're working on right now. And John's going to share a little bit more about that.
So we know that last year was a very challenging year. And when we looked at our LCAP and our parent surveys and our feedback from our school administrators, we know that we had a lot of issues with our students coming out of COVID. We saw increased behaviors. We saw students who were struggling with executive functioning skills because they hadn't been on a school campus. Self-regulation was a problem with a lot of students. We had students with a lot of mental health issues. And then there was that social awareness piece too. So fortunately, you as a board decided to give us more counselors, which has been absolutely fantastic. Because while we are addressing those issues, our focus is really more on what we just saw in that last slide, which is that social emotional wellness and trying to create students who are self-sufficient, who are self-aware, who can take agency in their own learning. And so our counselors this year, and we had the opportunity to meet with all of our elementary counselors, our focus was really not on solving the problems here, but looking at it a little bit more proactively and really focusing on the student wellness piece and using all of our new school counselors, our new elementary school counselors who are going to be full-time, to focus on helping our students to be well, to be stronger as individual students. So we're looking forward to having our elementary counselors, and Angela's going to talk a little bit more about the strategies that we're using, but we really did focus on how we not only help students who are struggling right now, but also to build our students for the future and help them be equal partners in that thriving, rigorous, safe, and healthy school community that we have. Some other proactive steps that we took this year, other than our increase in elementary counseling, we have Angela with us as our district counselor support. She's been absolutely amazing. And you have her to thank for not so many words on these slides, because when I did it, it was all words, because that's me. And she took all that and cleaned it up. So thank you, Angela. Credit where credit is due. Well, we did increase our Quest to College liaison counselor from a 0.8 to a full-time counselor. And then we also added the FTE at the middle schools to focus on CTE. And when we look at that through that lens of social emotional learning, again, we're looking at creating students who are taking agency with their own futures. And so by intervening early on in their process of whether it's moving on to a college education or even looking at college or career readiness, by starting in middle school and focusing on our middle school students to start looking at those career pathways that they may take in high school, we are creating students who are better prepared to be self-sufficient in their future. So we're working on that proactive lens. When we look at our counseling goals and expectations, we are focusing on safety, climate, and culture, as I know we are throughout our district. So our counselors are really going to be focused on creating able, healthy participants in our communities. That's our goal of counseling. So at our sites, these are the areas that we're going to focus on. When we're focusing on safety, our counselors are representing safe adults on campus. Being out there and interacting with students regularly is that tier 1 support that our counselors can provide. We know we're responding to students who have come out of COVID with some issues. A lot of those students that show up in our counseling office, they're looking at tier 2, sometimes tier 3 support. We want to increase that tier 1 support, that first interaction that they have with adults on their campus. So we're creating that safety on campus so students have a place to go. For the school climate piece of it, we want to be supporting that welcoming community for all. and really the goal there is intentionally making connections with students. So our counselors are going to be working on intentionally making those connections with students and meeting those social emotional needs of our students where they are. And then, of course, building partnerships with our parents and community as we go through. And then that culture, the whole school, all SLCUSD, that tier 1 and tier 2 programming that we do with our students, the social emotional learning pieces that we do with our students, the classes that our counselors will be teaching, the way that we interact with our students, those are the areas where we're really focusing on that whole student, whole culture, bringing it beyond just the individual student or the individual classroom. We're bringing that to the whole school. And we want to make sure that all of our students feel valued. And we know that when we do these things, our students do better. So some of the things that all of our counselors will be focusing on as we go through our year at all of our sites, we have care teams. Those are teams that meet to talk about individual students and then try to find the resources in our community, within our schools or in our community that can support our students who really need those the most. And our CARE stands for collaborate, affirm, restore, and educate. Those teams meet monthly to talk about our kids. It's an opportunity too for student support staff to get together and talk about what's going on across our district as well. So we're making sure that we're using our resources efficiently. We will have MFT access. I think our elementary schools are supposed to start this month. And we were a little bit worried at the high school level because we are partnering with County Behavioral Health. And as you may know, anybody that has an MFT license right now is probably working. Our governor is putting more money towards creating more MFTs because there's such a high demand. And so we were a little worried about finding enough qualified people. But as of Friday of last week, we found out that County Behavioral Health has a very healthy pool for us to choose from. So we're looking forward because that process is now moving. And we are looking forward to having that MFT access for really that tier 3 support for our students, those students who have the highest level of need that we can't meet through some of our other counseling programs, whether that's yes.
I think I'm on.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Calandro. Before you moved past it, I just wanted to ask a question. When you mentioned the care teams that meet monthly,
Yes.
How are they made aware of students that have needs?
That's a great question. So they are counselors on site. So some of it, when we look back at that last slide where I talked about safety, climate, and culture, it's about getting out there and knowing your students. So it's about connecting with the teachers, but we're also using, if you look at our last one, that data collection and screeners, we do have screeners that we are using for all of our students at our sites to check, mostly to look for those students that we might not see. Anybody who's been in the classroom can tell you, you're going to know those ones who need you pretty quickly right away. The ones who are acting out, it's the ones who are very quiet and might be struggling with something that they're not willing to share, that our screeners, we're hoping our screeners will help pick up some of those.
What kinds of questions would be on a screener for social emotional needs?
So for the social emotional screeners, they're pretty benign questions. It's a lot of them are similar to what kids take on the California Healthy Kids Survey or sometimes in the Youth True Survey.
Okay.
I feel like there's an adult at school who cares about me. Most days I feel happy. Those types of questions.
Okay.
So we're not, again, those screeners aren't to look for mentally ill. They're just a piece of data that we use when we look at that whole child. So it's not going to be the sole thing that would let a care team know, hey, this is a student who's struggling. We might be looking at grades. We might be looking at attendance. We might be looking at known trauma that this student has had somewhere. Maybe the student shared something. So there's lots of ways that kids end up on the radar of our counselors. And then it might be that someone gets referred through our family advocate of, hey, we heard this family has lost their home. We might need to be providing some extra support. Has anyone checked in with the kid? Because the kid might be holding it together beautifully at school because they don't want anyone to know that they just lost their home. So it's those types of things that those care teams, when they come together, we can identify how better to help that child.
Thank you. That's really encouraging.
Mrs. Fram?
Mr. Calandro, so getting back to the care teams, are they site specific? And then how do we, as a district, look at the trends per, is there, site for the care teams? Is there kind of an umbrella?
You want to talk about the history? Come on.
So on the care teams, we've got a variety of people like our school nurses, our family advocates, and then those team from there, we've got representatives to a district care team, which is kind of looking at the overall health and care of the district as well. So we have
Thank
school
you.
psychs, those kinds of.
But one of the things that we are working on this year is trying to find some of those ways to better track what's happening across our sites. This year, we know we got a lot of data very quickly. When we are doing what we set out to do, which is a lot of prevention,
Right.
it's harder to measure prevention unless we're looking at a lot of things. So when we talk with our elementary counselors in particular, some of those things that they've been doing at the elementary schools, the check in, check out, we're going to start making a little bit more formal and really starting to track more data just so we can see what's happening across all of our sites. Because I think we look at the problems sometimes, and then we work to solve the problems rather than looking at the systems and how, again, we want to keep our kids well and healthy and really build up every student's mental wellness so we can deal with fewer problems, hopefully in the future.
Thank you.
Our SEL programming is happening at the elementary schools and at the middle schools right now with Leader in Me at 7, excuse me, not Leader in Me, Second Step at 7 of our elementary schools. And Leader in Me at 3 of our elementary schools.
Excuse me, John.
Yes.
Just, I'm wondering about our family advocates. I know we have them at the high schools and I believe at the middle schools. Do we
Yes.
also have them at the elementary schools? How many family advocates do we have currently? We have 4. So they are just in the secondary.
No,
No.
they do work with the elementary schools as well.
So they are like 20% at Sinsheimer and 20% at Baywood and
I know
divided up.
and they've been broken up differently depending on where we're getting them.
Greatest need.
Yeah.
Okay.
By need and usually kind of by region. So
All right.
I know when I was at Laguna, we had one that worked primarily at Laguna and CL Smith because there was a tremendous amount of need right there. Doesn't mean they weren't working elsewhere, but we do try to put.
But
them
that
in
was a
places of
concentration for them.
mostly, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Brockman had a question.
Thank you. Hi, John. This is a lot of stuff. This is great. Can you, now that we have these new counselors, can you sort of take me quickly through a day? Maybe after stopping at Starbucks, but
I'm going to let Angela do that because she's going to talk about kind of the elementary counselors and
Okay.
then the secondary counselors. So yeah, these are the things that just big picture, they're going to be doing kind of all year long. And then she can kind of dial in a little bit more at what they're going to be doing.
Great. Thanks. I appreciate that.
So again, we have our SEL programming. Our SSTs, we're working on, those are our student success teams. We're working on getting our practices more aligned from school to school. So when we are using that student success team as part of our MTSS, when it goes from the elementary school to the middle school to the high school, we understand what the language is in there. So we've come up with a common form and we're coming up with more common practices. So when everybody looks at that, we know what we're looking at, and we're better able to track those interventions over time for students. And then, as I said, we're working on all types of data collection, as well as the screeners that we've used in the past, which is our FastBridge Sabres screener that we do. At the bottom there are links to the Second Step Pacing Guide and to Leader in Me. Just as a reference, if you're wondering kind of what we cover in those things, you can click on those and those will take you to a little bit more information. But our counselors also have a comprehensive counseling guide for the year that is a living document. So it does allow for some changes because our counselors do meet together monthly for elementary and high school or secondary separately. But then we do also have joint meetings where everyone comes together. So it gives them the opportunity to collaborate, but also take a look at that calendar and see if we need to focus on something, if there's been an event in our community that maybe they need to address, or if there's issues that are popping up that we're seeing are happening across our district, our counselors may come together and just make that an area of focus with our students. Marilyn.
If I recall correctly, it's probably been 4 years now that the San Luis Coastal Education Foundation funded the trial of Leader in Me. at Monarch Grove.
Yes.
And so do we now have that in place across all of our elementary schools?
No, we've got it right now in 3 of our elementary schools. So a couple of other elementary schools have picked it up and they're starting it this year. Monarch, of course, is continuing it. So they're a little bit ahead of the curve. I was just today at CL Smith and meeting with their Lighthouse team, which is their group of teachers and parents who are looking at how they're going to implement that. They're off to a fantastic start, I'll tell you that. So we are looking at that. We're still moving forward with second step as well as our social emotional learning. But the goal of that those social emotional learning programs are really, when you go back to that lovely chart, it's really about building students who are both self-aware and then aware of their community, but are able to be proactive in their community. So that is the goal of our social emotional learning program, whether it's Leader in Me or Second Step. They both do it. They just do it a little bit differently. Nice to have both of them at the schools. So we're going to continue with Second Step this year and then see where we are at the end of this year.
Thank you.
Back to
Frantically coming up with a day schedule. Okay, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the elementary counselors did during their training and what kind of our focus will be this year. Mr. Buckman, let me know if that answers your questions and we can talk some more about that. Of course, it wouldn't be an elementary counseling slide if I didn't include some cute photos. So this is just a glimpse of what our counselors have been able to do, being there every day on the same site with one site to really focus on. And I feel like I need to start by saying that just the reality of having only one school to really be able to focus your energy on has been, for those counselors that had multiple sites, has been really one of the biggest changes. The job is still there. The day-to-day is still there. The duties are still there. The fact that they can really focus on one site and make that happen for that specific school is what the difference, I think, is going to be the real difference maker this year. So our elementary counselors met for 2 days prior to the school year because we did have such a new group, right? We have 4 returning counselors and 5 brand new to our district counselors. And some of the areas that we really decided to focus on, we've got outlined here in this graphic. And the first one, it goes to kind of what you were speaking to, Mr. Buckman, which is this idea of a franchise model. It's something that Shelley Benson and I picked up at a school counseling leadership conference we attended last year. And this idea that our schools across the elementary level, our comprehensive counseling programs, look similar, like a franchise, right? Across about 80% of these programs are going to look the same. If you're at CL Smith or you're at Del Mar or you're at Hawthorne, you're seeing the same kinds of programs being rolled out to students. Now, there's always that 20%, right? There's always the McDonald's that has the playland and then the ones that don't, right? So there's always that extra color and flair and fun for your specific site. But what we really want to impress upon with the counselors this year is that we implement a comprehensive counseling program across all of our elementary schools that look similar. And that looks like things like our check-in, check-out program, which will be happening at all of our sites. That looks like the universal screener of savers happening at all of our sites, being analyzed and talked about with staff at all sites. It looks like care meetings happening at every site with stakeholders from the mental health teams. It looks like SSTs, SEL curriculum, those kinds of things. Intervention programs start with Hello Week, Kindness Week, those things being pushed out across all of our schools. So that's really what the franchising piece looks like, and something we're going to really spend a lot of this year focusing on with our new counselors and our veteran counselors, because this is a new model for them as well. Another piece of the important puzzle this year is increased visibility and opportunity to be out there at lunches and breaks. With us being there every single day, we're able to not say like, oh my gosh, I won't be back until Monday, so I've got to get this done. It's that opportunity to say, I'm out here. I'm not in charge of the swings necessarily, but I'm out here watching the culture and the climate and the safety of our schools. And I'm out here with the ability to identify trends in behavior. And I'm out here able to really look at any safety measures that might be happening, students that are withdrawn or might need some extra support. So that's another major focus of our elementary counselors this year, is that idea of being increased visibility during, before, after school lunch and recess. And then lastly, another real important piece is that data collection and accountability piece. This is, we want to show the importance of our role. We know that you guys gave us this incredible opportunity to go to full time at most of our sites. And our goal this year is to really collect that data and show you and show our community the importance of that. And so we will be using many of the models that we already have in place, like our savers, like the Youth Truth, like California Healthy Kids Survey, along with behavior referrals from parents and teachers and those kinds of things, to develop an end of the year report for us to be able to report out on how our counseling services went this year across the elementary level. So that's kind of the elementary piece. Mr. Beckman, did you feel like that kind of answered it for you?
Yeah. Okay, I was really excited because when you talk, I was just wondering about that schoolyard piece, because I keep thinking of teachers, staff as first responders for
Mhm.
our kids, and that suddenly just makes it even better. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks. And that's gonna go kind of right into our secondary model, which is also something that we're, our secondary counselors, we know, if you know a secondary counselor, give them a hug today or this week, because they finally got through schedule changes. The first few weeks of school are over, and we know that our secondary counselors are really kind of the heart of our secondary, our middle and our high schools, right? They are the people that our students go to usually first in their time of crisis, in their time of need. And what we're seeing as we talk about what our secondary counselors are going to look at across the year is they are still, the words they used for me, and I just felt like I had to share them, was we are still seeing the ripple of COVID through our schools, both academically and socially, right? And so our secondary counselors are not only making sure that our students academically are caught up and up to speed based on what's happened the past few years with COVID, but they're also dealing with a tremendous number of one-on-one, really high need, tier 3 type crisis interventions, those kinds of things, right? And so our counselors are spending a lot of time doing that, and that will continue to be a focus when we talk about early and consistent intervention. Our counselors have always been that first line of intervention at many of our secondary schools, and that's continuing to be a huge need. And John talked a little bit about how we're seeing the flex of those resources in our community, and whether we have the resources in our community to support the need right now. And we're doing everything we can as a district and as a secondary counseling team to meet those needs. And they're going to keep doing it because they're secondary counselors. But that kind of ties right into the next piece of our model here, which is this idea of universal student support. So we know, if you look at an elementary model, that our most effective and efficient way to reach kids and make change is at a tier 1 and tier 2 level. Those are for broader, bigger populations of students. That tier 3 population is usually one-on-one. It's for a smaller percentage. So our shift and our focus this year at the secondary level will be to continue to explore how they can get from behind their desks out with the kids, right? Out in the community, doing that, being visible, working with, creating relationships with kids that maybe don't find their office doors, but that they will find them out on the playground. Ties right back to that, or not the playground, I guess the yard in secondary, ties right back to that model of safety, climate, and culture. So again, our counselors will be working with their administration to kind of shift some culture maybe up there, which has been, come to my office, find me, I'm a tier 3 support, to I am part of this broader community where I can really help implement some tier 1 and tier 2 interventions across the board. And then lastly, we see that, we're enhancing educational equity. We've been doing that at the secondary level for a number of years now, and we'll continue that with the implementation of our CTE counselor at the middle school level, along with implementation of the 4- and 6-year plans, continued outreach to the community through our family advocates, use of resources in the area, and along with implementation of family programming. If any of you were able to attend what we wish our parents understood programs in the spring, or the screenings of angst, which was a video that was shared with students and parents last spring and in the fall as well. So that's kind of what our secondary counselors are up to. And it's a big job for all of us and a big opportunity for us. And that kind of wraps up what we have planned for you today. I just want to say thank you for your time, your commitment, your dedication to our kids. Your implementation of additional counseling support really tells us where our board and our community stands with their commitment to the emotional well-being of our kiddos. And we're going to leave you with this quote that one of our elementary counselors chose as her inspirational quote for the year, which is, "Every kid is one caring adult away from being a success story."
Thank you.
I'm going to go to the public first to see if there's anybody from the public that would like to address us on this. If you would, please indicate by raising your Zoom hand, Mrs. Dawson, or I'll get there in just a second, Tony. Nobody? Oh, Mr. Evans? You have 3
Hello.
minutes, sir.
Tony Evans. So several comments regarding the elementary counseling. Obviously, when I started in elementary teaching, elementary counselors were not a thing, and they sort of snuck their way in and incrementally. But I don't think anyone ever felt that there was enough of a resource there to satisfy the counselors, that they could do their jobs, and everybody else that was making demands on them. What I specifically want to comment on is the franchise idea for the elementary counseling program. And what I think that franchise model will probably allow you to do is monitor what's going on in 2 pretty significant ways. One is quality control. Decades experience in education. We've had many, many programs implemented, and they start going with a lot of enthusiasm and just sort of fizzle off. And we, don't really live up to the promise. So that by having a franchise model, that quality control piece can be monitored carefully from one side to the other. So this allows you to know if in fact what you're building as your counselor program and is working across the board. The second piece is drift, because you can have promise, this is what we're doing, this is what the program looks like. But as people implement the program, they start putting their own personal biases in it, things like that. And so pretty soon there's drift, and that franchise model does not exist anymore. So you don't know why your program may or may not be living up to your expectations. And the third thing that I think is important with the franchise model is that it will allow you, if you do the quality control piece and control drift, it will allow you to identify variables at the individual sites that may need to be addressed, that may not be working under the program that you have implemented. And so you can start that tweaking process. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anybody else that's here that would like to address the board? And I don't think we had anybody from Zoom. So this was just a discussion item. Is there any other board member comments? Ms. Delver-Drew, Mr. Buckman, Mrs. Sheffer, Dr. Eisendrath Rogers.
Well, I just wanted to say, first of all, how thrilled I am about the CTE counselor and making CTE more known and more popular at an earlier age with the kids will be, I think, have great results about having an understanding and a different value shift about career technical education, because I think, I don't want to say this, but I will. In the past, there's been like a little bit of a stigma, if you do this hands-on thing, then that's not the same as going to a great academic college, but of course we know it's career and college, first of all. But secondly, here Cal Poly is learn by doing. So it fits right in with Cal Poly's programs and desires. And so I just think it's a wonderful thing, and I'd love to learn more about it as we go along. And then the second thing was the mention of partnerships with parents. And it's so important to get parents involved now. And I was wondering when we could hear more about the partnerships with the parents. I know there was a mention in the LCAP about parent trainings and the initiative to get parents more involved. I was wondering, can you say anything now or as we go along? Later?
Later, yes, I can tell you it's something that we're working on this year. We've looked into a couple different opportunities to bring parents along in different communication that we'll be implementing throughout the year. So I don't have a lot for you right now, but I can tell you it's a focus area for this year to continue to build upon and develop the way we are utilizing parents and informing parents and bringing them on in social emotional learning.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Buckman.
Yep, thanks. So when I look at the franchise model, I also think that it's not just to monitor teachers and not just to make sure they're doing the right thing. I'm not sure that that's what we want to do with our teaching staff. What I also hear is that we're going to have, hopefully I got this correctly, we're going to have similar McDonald meals with French fries. We're going to be able to make sure that everybody gets
Hopefully happy meals.
happy meals. Thank you. Sorry, that was great. So I'm also looking at similar standards. I was at an event this weekend and a parent specifically came to me and said, why don't we have enough counselors? And it was so good because I had just gotten my agenda and was able to just end this. So she actually went back and checked and emailed me. So she's very happy and I think the public's going to be happy. And I'm just excited about this and the model. Thanks.
Mrs. Sheffer?
Did you want to say something, Janet? Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, along with that franchise model and having a district lead counselor who's pulling people together and overseeing and having monthly meetings where they can come and talk about, what is making this happy meal extra special and what tweaks do we need to have. I think it'll be very powerful.
My sense of the parents.
I just wanted to comment that, again, the depth of the information provided in this, in your presentation, I had gone through and clicked on all the links. And I think that comprehensive school calendar, counseling calendar is really, it looks like, and I'm sure it is, a whole lot of drilling down, but also if everyone's doing it together and then able to compare and say, this is what we're seeing at our side. Are you seeing this over here? We did this same exercise. We watched these same videos. We did this, we did our Thankful Thursdays. What are kids at your site thankful for? What's going on? That's really, it seems to be a very effective way of gathering information that is deeper and more meaningful and useful to move forward, to take using this as a jumping off point and then tweaking that franchise model in future years that, okay, we've got this, but we need to go deeper into this, into the future. I appreciate you sharing that with all that information with the board to go through and take a look at. So thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Eisendrath-Rogers?
I wonder if you sometimes feel like there's a team counselor and a team teacher and never the two shall meet, so there may be things going on with students that would be very helpful for the teacher to know and vice versa. But do we have an opportunity where we can, where the teachers and the counselors can kind of make that work so that the kids are getting the attention they need?
I just know from my experience, I could probably have Angela speak to it more, as actually a counselor on the grounds at our elementary school, but I know from my experience for so many years at the elementary school level that they really are an integral part of a team within the school site where our teachers recognize the value of our counselors on site and are in regular communication with the counselors when they're recognizing things in students. And as the counselors find things out about students, they're having that communication with the classroom teachers. So there is quite a bit of back and forth communication between our counseling staff and our teaching staff is really, a part of that whole school team.
Good.
Having been at a site where I've got amazing counselors and amazing teachers who really worked very well together and kept those lines of communication open. I think the biggest benefit that we have this year is that our elementary counselors are on campus full-time because it's really easy to fall into that kind of team teacher, team counselor role when you don't have access. And having someone there all day, every day as an integral part of your campus, now that person is available to the teachers. They're available for the, hey, I just noticed with that kid. Or, when our counselors are out on the yard watching the students, they can find the teacher, follow the kid into the class and go, have you noticed this about this? And the teacher then might be like, oh, good, I'm not the only one who's seeing that. It really opens up that dialogue between the teachers and the counselors and creates a team that's there for the child rather than just the teacher advocating or just the family advocate advocating. Now you've got the counselors there full time and you've got a group of people who are all looking out for those same things. So I think adding more time to our elementary counselors is just going to enhance that collaboration.
I love to hear that. Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, thank you very much. I'm I'm so happy that we were able to do this, because I know one of the things that we have heard over and over again is our kids need more counseling time, our schools need more counseling time. I know I want to talk to Mrs. Roger for just a second, who has consistently talked about school counseling and the importance of school counseling. And thanks for continuing to make sure that that's a critical issue for us. So.
Yeah, I am so excited. I am just so excited about the opportunities that this presents for kids. The outreach that we'll be able to make now that we have full-time counselors at all our elementary sites. It's really been on my wish list, and I'm so glad it's here, and I really have appreciated this presentation. And thank you, Mr. Unger.
Dr. Prater?
Yeah, I don't want to go beyond what because this is as all of you know, this is a passionate topic for me. One of the things that I think Ms. Roger just whispered in my ear, how long can we sustain this? And I think the problems we've had in the past have a lot to do with the counseling program being somewhat disconnected from the academic success side of the equation. But our work with MTSS encapsulates, it includes the social emotional wellness of a child with the academic achievement of a child. So you can't separate those out. So counseling will no longer be seen as this sort of soft, feel-good place, but especially because of how you guys have willingly shifted this idea of being out, being visible, being part of that whole child experience, from being visible in the yard to forming an opinion of what you're seeing. Now you've become, and to collecting information. So now we are well on our way. I think our when I look at our next presentation on, the academic assessment piece, I can't help but think that part of that academic success story is integrally connected, integrally connected to the child's success in the classroom. So for me, we have a good system. It has grit, it has clarity, it's sophisticated, and it's coming together in a way that we truly can now make sense of how each school site works, what's the nature of that outside of the franchise model, what each site's unique characteristics are, what their unique needs are. And over time, it'll be like a trim tab. It'll be, okay, what do we see coming next year? And what do we need to do to meet the whole child's needs? So I see this as such a beautiful place to be. The question of sustainability is now a matter of the board's third priority, which is, at the end of this year, how do we know what's working, that we're spending money on, that we're dedicating resources to? So I really appreciate your efforts as a counseling team to really bring accountability and clarity to the conversation, because I think that's been missing in the past. I think you can do it. I think you're well on your way. And I just applaud you for your efforts. So thank you.
Thank you. We've had a request to take a short break. I'm inclined to do that. Why don't we take about a 5-minute break and come back at 7:51, something like that. And then we'll move on into item 10.02, understanding elementary assessment tools and their use. Thank you. 5 minutes. Do you want 5? You know when you're ready, Mandy. Oh, okay. Everybody, we're back. The board is here. We have a quorum. So let's move to item 10.02, understanding elementary assessment tools and their use.
Yes, good evening. I'm Rick Mayfield, Director of Elementary Learning and Achievement, and I'm here tonight with Laura Storm, who's Principal on Special Assignment. It says MTSS and I Innovate, but we could add about 4 or 5 other things to the list of jobs that she does in instructional services. But as we move into a more regular cycle of reporting data to the board post-COVID, at least in terms of curriculum instruction and assessment, we wanted to go over tonight some of the tools that we use at the elementary level for assessment. We'll talk about standardized tools, benchmark assessments, et cetera, and how we use those. And as I mentioned, Laura does a great job in instructional services in many ways, but data is one of her jams, as she would put it. And she's working on her doctorate right now, and so immersed in the world of data. So we'll let Laura share some elementary assessment tools, and then I'll present the preliminary SBAC data that we have received from the state. Mrs. Storm.
Thank you. Good to see all of you. So tonight, I am going to focus on 3 types of assessments. So universal screening, trimester benchmarks, and state assessments. And we're going to talk about what they are and why we use them, and some of the qualities of the different kinds of assessments. We've been really disrupted with not assessing because of COVID, and then launching universal screening within MTSS has caused some confusion as well. So I'm hoping this brings some clarity to the tools and the data that you're going to see this year. So let's start by talking about universal screening. Universal screening is that foundation of MTSS. If you think back many board meetings ago, I talked about going to the dentist and being screened. This is that. So it's skill-based, it's curriculum agnostic. It doesn't tie to a specific curriculum, which is a hard shift for some people. Like, wait, what? But we want to know, do they have the skills, the foundational skills when you pull it away from a curriculum? All students are assessed. That's where the universal comes from. And then usually you universally screen 3 times a year, sometimes 4, depending. These are the questions we answer using these tools. So which students are at risk? Like the dentist, right? What needs exist in Tier 1 instruction? So you can look holistically and see, ooh, we have some gaps here. We need to shore up what we're doing for everyone in the universal tier. And are students growing at the adequate or anticipated rate? So we can look at growth. So in San Luis Coastal, our universal screening tool, we use a system called FastBridge. It has assessments within it. So you'll hear A reading, early reading, auto reading. That's all FastBridge. Okay. We screen kindergartners and first graders September, January, and May. We are screening right now for kinder and first grade. It's one-on-one. It takes about 5 minutes. Second grade and up, we do it in September, so beginning of the year, and then at the end of each trimester. So that is FastBridge. We use it for universal screening. Here's some questions we answer with it. So what percentage of students are in the different risk bands? So FastBridge will tell us, here's the percent of students in high risk, some risk, low risk. They never say no risk, I notice. I find that interesting, and advanced. And then you can dig down within that and see how are subgroups performing. Screening is different from the bar of proficiency. You can be some low risk or low risk, right? And still not be proficient, which is interesting. But this is based on like reading research nationally that says when children are at risk of, they call it reading failure. I don't really love that term, but they're in the high risk or the some risk. So when a student flags at risk on the screener, what happens next? And this takes me back to the board workshop where we looked at the case study of the individual student. So the first thing that happens is the MTSS teacher at the school site or the academic intervention teacher that Diane talked about earlier, they'll do a deep dive. We never determine risk based on just one data point. You have to have multiple pieces of evidence. So a deep dive, that's just more assessments. We're going to narrow it down. So then we'll use those multiple data points to verify the risk. So yes, this student really is at risk. Okay. And then it's what area is the risk? Is it phonemic awareness? Is it fluency? Is it comprehension? So what is like the real narrow area of need? And then if the student is going to go into a group, so move into like a tier 2 intervention, right? Which one would it be? We're not just doing just leveled literacy intervention anymore. We're doing Sunday system, adding bridge the gap, adding fluency in trimester 2. So where is the need? What group matches? Then if they're in a group, we do the regular progress monitoring. You might remember that from June when I showed you all the data points on students, no matter which intervention they're in, that's happening. And then of course, we're going to monitor growth on future screenings. So we love to see students that were high risk move into some risk or some risk in the low risk, right? And kind of move through those bands out of risk. So that's universal screening. Let's talk about trimester benchmarks. So trimester benchmarks, that's the bar. That is the proficiency bar. So it's based on the standards. Yes, Mrs. Spring?
Sorry, Laura, Mr. Storm, could you go back to the previous slide?
I hope I can. Yes.
Okay, so when, and maybe you can't tell me this because, we're still deciding if a student has, for the year, let's say they were high risk or whatever, and they've moved to, like a low risk or whatever. How does that, like the next year, are we longitudinally, do you foresee being able to, look at students who they started here, but through a series of interventions over a couple of years that they're sustained, so they're no longer really at risk?
I would say that's one of the things I am most proud of with the work that we did last year, really digging into launching the MTSS system, is we now have that kind of data on individual students. So I can go back and see where were they at the beginning of last year on the screeners. If they were in a group and we did progress monitoring, I can see all of that data. So John Calandro and I had a great conversation about student success teams, because all of that data should be coming to the table for student success team now. So we absolutely are watching and we're going back and looking. Yeah, it's exciting. Okay, so back to trimester benchmarks. So this is basically the bar, right? So these are standards based. Did a student meet the standard? They're aligned to our curriculum. They're common across the grade levels. So every fifth grader is, for example, taking the same math assessment. We use them a lot for standards-based grading, and it's 3 times a year. Okay. So really, here's the questions these answer. To what degree did students learn the standards that were taught? So as a teacher, I taught it. Did they learn it? And to what degree did they learn it? Right? And then with this particular standard, is the individual student exceeding it, meeting it, approaching it, getting close, or just not yet? So aligning to our report card where we have 4, 3, 2, 1. So that's what this tells us. This is the bar of the standard. Did they meet the standard or not? Did they learn what I taught?
So, excuse me, Laura. So are these the teacher created, or are these coming with the curriculum? Are they at the back of the textbook?
So for reading, we take, in second grade and up, we take one little piece of FastBridge that gives us a Lexile level, which is basically a reading level. K1, they use the benchmark assessment system, the running record, to get the reading level. In math, there are assessments that were, 8 years ago, maybe now, 10 years ago now, were kind of created by a group of teachers that go through the standards. They pulled different questions out of the curriculum. And then the writing is the writing on demand that goes with our writing curriculum. So these are more curriculum aligned than a universal screener, right? So I taught it. Did they learn it? Right.
Yep.
And I would hope the teacher would know the answer to that question before they get to the trimester, but that's really kind of what we're finding out.
So I'm very interested in something you said 8 years ago. So we actually have 8 years of longitudinal data.
I would have to find out when we launched those math assessments, but those were coming into place when I started at Monarch Grove. So in math, we have quite a bit.
Okay, great. Thank you.
They've done some refinement on them over time, right? Like bad item, let's change it, that kind of thing. But in general, yeah, in math.
And going along with that, I have two questions actually. The first is that since we've seen a change in math instruction, given Common Core and our focus on bridges, I'm assuming that these trimester benchmarks include not only calculation, but the word problems that we're starting to see and all that sort of thing. Is that?
These were created to align with Common Core.
Okay.
And with the new report card, when we changed to the standards-based report card with Common Core. So it is all aligned to that.
And then my second question, how does this influence or impact our professional development and the conversations that teachers should be having, grade level conversations?
Well, so in June, I walked you through what happens when these results come back, and that teachers have planning days, they look at results. The math assessments, we can look by standard and by item and see, did students learn it and to what extent? So it's a constant conversation of looking at this. You just kind of look in a different way because you've taught it. So if they didn't learn it, what are you doing, right, to remedy that? So that can be, something that happens as a whole class reteach. Oh, wow, my whole class didn't get number 20 right. I need to go back, or in like smaller groups or individual, that kind of thing. So they definitely look at results and drill down that far. So yeah, go ahead.
So another question I had for that is, since those assessments have been around for a long time, and like you said, there's been some kind of, tweaking for, with teacher input. What are we looking at? Are these benchmark assessments, because some of them can be rather long, are we refining them so that it's, those essential standards, so that's less, they're informative, but less time consuming for the teachers? Where are we in that process? And maybe that's not even.
No, I can speak to this. So over the summer, 2 summers ago now, I guess, interesting work was done with CDE. They went through and they identified what they called key standards. They did a beautiful job in English language arts, really pulling those out. In math, Joe Bowler from Stanford led the charge there. And what it was a concept map of how this standard relates to this standard, which relates to this standard, which we didn't find all that helpful in pulling out key standards. So yes, we hope, but then you get into that where when you backwards map, this one relates to this one later, so we haven't done a lot to trim them down. I know they're long.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I mentioned this already, but these are the common assessments that we use for trimester benchmark assessments. And then we look at this. So we will bring this to you. What percentage of students are proficient? So they're meeting that bar or they're exceeding it, right? And then how are subgroups within that performing? So this is, are they proficient or not? Did they get to the bar? And then how are subgroups doing? Yes.
So as far as the writing assessment, when I was teaching, is it still along the lines of the different types of,
yes,
like starting with narrative and moving on to or whatever it is, informative and then persuasion and so forth.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
It aligns to the curriculum for the grade level. Every grade starts with a narrative, and then it switches a little bit, whether it's informational or opinion. And then even, I believe, sixth grade dips into a little bit of literary essay. But yes, it aligns to text type.
And it's amazing how that has evolved over the years. When I first started teaching, we were happy to get a third grader to write a paragraph with a beginning and an end and 3 supporting statements. And now they write pages and pages. Right. So it's amazing what can be accomplished with that writing, which used to be a bugaboo, especially for ELs.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Our students are writing a lot.
So, sorry.
It's okay.
Before you get going, because this is great.
I can't decide if I'm sweating because it's hot or because you guys are asking me so many questions.
I think we should open some of these doors back here. I bet it's cooler outside. And it's not. It's hot. It's not you. When we see there's meeting and exceeding. So that's 2 bands.
Mhm.
And there's 2 more, right?
Yes, there is. So this aligns to the report card. So there's 4 bands of like a not yet, which would be a 1, an approaching, which is a 2, and then a meeting, which is 3. And then
And so this is going to be me just being a broken record. When we see data come back to us, sometimes we see combined the 2, what I'll call lower bands and then the 2 upper bands. And for me, and I don't know, I'm sure teachers too, but I'd really like to see it all 4 bands.
Yeah.
Okay.
yes. I think that's something that we can easily accomplish.
Great. Sorry to be a broken record.
No, it's important. It's important because a lot of times when you have students in that lowest band, they don't make it to that bar of proficiency, but they grow into that next band. You know, they go from like the 1 to the 2, but you don't see it because they didn't get to the bar of the 3. So it's an important thing to look at, most definitely.
I have a question about what you're talking about. So is all the data that's going to come after this that we got to preview before the meeting, is that based on the level 3 proficiency? Not the 4?
Yes. So Mr. Mayfield is going to talk about basically the percent of students that met the bar for CASP. So the 3 or the 4 on the CASP or the SBAC, which leads me perfectly into our state assessments. So these are the assessments that students across California take. They're comprehensive, they're reliable and valid. They've been very well vetted. These are what we report to the public, and it informs that California school dashboard. So really, we find this out from our state assessments. Did the student meet or exceed grade level standards? So did they reach the bar of proficiency or above, right? And then for an assessment called the LPAC, to what degree is the student acquiring the English language? So I'm going to talk about LPAC here in 1 second, but that's what we find out from these state assessments. Did they meet the bar for the year? Yes, Mrs. Frame.
So I just thought of this question. So do we, when we're looking at the benchmark assessments for, that are on the report card, and let's say we have a targeted subgroup that gets X percent on our benchmark assessments for the district, does that match that targeted subgroup performance on our benchmark? Does it match what they do on the state assessments? Percent, like if they get 60% in, ELA, a targeted subgroup, do they kind of get within that range, or are we really off?
So I haven't drilled down to look closely at that. Last year's state assessments were so wild, right? We had a lot of students that didn't assess, just all those things. What we do notice is that the Lexile level that we get from that little sliver of FastBridge that gives us that reading level seems to align fairly closely with SBAC. So students that are meeting the bar on the Lexile level in reading tend to, not always perfectly, meet the bar on the CAS or the SBAC. And that's just me like looking at reports, right? I haven't sat down to crunch the numbers. I could, but I noticed that. And I noticed that back when I was teaching 6th grade, when we had the California Standards Test in Lexile, that it seemed to align. So, yeah. Okay, so our state assessments. So in English language, arts, and math, we use Smarter Balanced, or SBAC, we call it. And then for students with IEPs, they often take the California Alternate Assessment, or the CAW, and we give that in 3rd through 8th and 11th. And the CAW is just the alternate. And that's typically for students in our more intense special day classes. In science, we give the California Standards Test, or the California Science Test, the CAST. We can't just call anything what it is, right? We have to have a name for it all. The CAST. And then the CAST has a CAW version as well for students with IEPs. And then English language acquisition, we use the LPAC, which stands for English Language Proficiency Assessments for California. See why we like to just call it the LPAC, but it assesses students that are English learners in reading, writing, listening, and speaking. So it gives us information on how well are they acquiring English. Yes, Mrs. Frame.
Well, I just have a question on this one because I don't know really anything about the LPAC. You know, the CELT, it wasn't aligned, by grade level. So is this more closely, when you're looking at a student's English language proficiency, is it aligned with academic English? You get what I'm saying?
I do. And I might want Mr. Mayfield to jump in. What I have noticed when I see LPAC data is a lot of times students score much higher on the listening and the speaking, and their reading and the writing, where it is that more academic, is more challenging. I don't know, Mr. Mayfield, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Just say that it's probably more aligned with language development than it is grade level.
So the state assessments tell us what % of students are proficient, so meeting or exceeding the bar for the year. We can break it down into how our subgroups performing and how are our English learners progressing. So that's what we find out from the state. So thinking about all these three, yes.
Thank you very much. So we will see data and we will say, oh, there's an achievement gap. And is this where the state assessments, is that where that comes from?
You can see it in all three.
You can see it in all three, but Rick's shaking his, thank you.
You will see it in all three. Yeah.
Oh, boy.
No, that's good. It means it's valid. If we didn't, I would be right? Like I would be worried. Yeah. Yeah. So to kind of wrap us up, we just wanted to kind of package up the three that you're going to see. So universal screening in reading, trimester benchmarks, or the common assessments in reading, writing, and math 3 times this year, and then the state assessments. But when I think about all of these, I really just go back to the most impactful assessment that we use as educators. That's the informal assessment that happens every day in the classroom that drives what are you doing in the next minute? What are you doing tomorrow? These matter, but for teachers, it's that in the moment that really informs the instruction. So with that, what other questions can I answer?
So something just dawned on me. When you talked about in the classroom, immediate response, there's not very many jobs out there where you are getting immediate feedback and especially when you're affecting lives. So I didn't catch that. That's pretty impressive.
It is.
And it is the most valuable.
It is. And I think the teachers that make the biggest impact are the ones that are highly skilled at that checking for understanding and that quick formative assessment on the fly, because they can see like, oh, didn't get it, got to adjust right now. So
thank you.
Okay, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Mayfield to talk about state assessments, SBAC or CASP.
Yeah, so now that we've talked about tools, we'll break into some of the assessments.
Are we on 10.03? Or are we still on
We're mov- we're
10.02?
moving To 10.03.
Okay, thank you. Well, hold on just a second. Is there anybody from the public that would like to address us on this particular item, on what Mrs. Storm just talked about? Okay, Mrs. Dawson says no. All right, thank you, Mr. Mayfield.
You bet. My pleasure. So as we mentioned before, we've had a disruption to regular data cycles that we report to the board over the last several years. And so we're happy that we are going to be able to get back on a more regular cycle of reporting information and being able to compare our information to other districts within our county and within the state. What we have done in the past and what we're going to do tonight is report only our district data first. And then once the state certifies the county and state results, then we'll bring back to you a comparison of our district along with other districts in the county and the state of California on the CASP or the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress results. And Mr. O'Connor is here as well tonight to help me with any of the secondary questions that you might have. Just as a refresher, CASP, as I mentioned, is the California Assessment of Student Performance and Progress, includes the California Science Test or the CAST, the ELA and math assessments, otherwise known as Smarter Balanced Assessments, or SBAC. You've heard that term also. And then we also in the past have administered the Spanish reading test. It just came up to speed pretty much a year or two before COVID hit. We elected not to give it to reduce the assessment load during the COVID time, and we'll revisit that with our dual immersion programs coming up, because I do think it is important to be able to assess the level of Spanish achievement that our students have as well. In English language arts or ELA, reading, writing, listening, and then research and inquiry are assessed. And in mathematics, concepts and procedures, problem solving and data analysis, and communicating reasoning. These are computer adaptive tests, so they adjust as the student takes the test. If several questions in a row are missed, the questions kind of reduce in difficulty. Conversely, if several questions in a row are answered correctly, the assessment gets a little bit more difficult. And so it is computer adaptive that way. They shortened the test in 2021, and they have said that that will continue. So California Department of Education says that will continue, which is a great thing. But the shortened version does still measure the same standards and give us the same information. So we're glad about that.
So Rick, I was a little concerned when I read about the shortened test and the fact that it's adaptive. So I miss something. There's a word in the question I don't understand. So I do poorly on the first question that asked me, I don't know, to find X on the triangle. But then if there's a second one, I might be able to do it because I understand the question differently or better.
Right.
And if there's a third one, then we really have confirmation.
Yeah.
So when we talked about shortening the test and that it would be just as effective, what I'm envisioning is there's only going to be one chance for a kid to find X.
It wouldn't be one chance. No, I think in the past, sometimes one standard had maybe 5, 8, even 10 questions. And so they reduced that number down. One of the beautiful things about standardized testing, if that phrase exists, one of the beautiful things about standardized testing is that it's vetted over tens of thousands of students. And so trends appear and the test administrators are able to then adjust the assessments. But where we had 8, 10 questions about one topic before, that number has been reduced. And so it ends up being a shorter time that kids have the test in front of them.
And you're feeling comfortable that kids
Very-
have enough. Okay, thank
Very
you.
much so, you bet. As was also, please.
I'm sorry. I just thought about and when you're looking, it's sort of, so the new comparison will really need to be with the shorter version of if we're looking at, longitudinal data, is the state going to provide some kind of a template that if we're looking at over, taking out those years that were because of COVID, but, let's say 2018, 2017, and then skipping a couple of years and then moving, is the state going to provide a template that we can compare like the old longer version with a shorter version? So there is, the ability to compare.
My understanding is that we can compare those things. What they did say though during COVID is to be weary of the data that was produced during those
yeah.
COVID years because many families opted out of the assessment. And we've gone back with last year's spring assessment to 95% requirement for participation rate and things like that. So it's more kind of back to the normal way that we would do standardized assessment. But my understanding is they are comparable.
Well, I'm glad to hear that the state is recognizing that those 2 years were.
Right. Agreed. As we mentioned earlier, the results that we'll report to you tonight will be the combination of standard met and standard exceeded, or 3 and 4. So the percentages you will see are the percentages of students who either met or exceeded the particular standard.
I'm just going to be
please.
This may be a horse I've already ridden, but I love the fact that we showed the percent of kids that are doing great, but sometimes for me, it's that percent that's not doing, that's almost more important.
Yeah.
At least in my
Well,
viewpoint.
one thing that's a great point. And one thing to keep in mind is that we do a much deeper dive at sites into individual data. So teachers at the beginning of the school year will get a detailed list of how their kids did at each category of the SBAC. You remember earlier it said that it's listening, reading, all those categories are reported on the data reports that we give teachers, and they get to review their last year's class to see how their kids did. And they can look for, things that make sense, things that might stand out as a surprise, and then they'll get their current year's class. So then they can begin to plan intervention groups along with all the other data points that Mrs. Storm mentioned earlier, so that we do have the multiple measures that we can use to determine what actions we're going to take to help kids.
So when my dad gave me a bicycle and he came home, I would tell him how many times I could ride around the block. What I didn't tell him was how many times I fell off the bicycle. And so sometimes, and that's bragging, I got it. But so sometimes I feel, it may be more important to look at.
Yep, I agree.
Okay.
And the example that Mrs. Storm gave is a good one. You want to celebrate that student who moved from a low level 1, to a high level 2, even though it won't show up on this particular bar graph right here.
Mr. Mayfield, I'm a little confused by the descriptors on these numbers.
Okay.
I understand that, 1 and 2, but then 3, if a student has met the standard, why is the descriptor demonstrates progress toward mastery? Isn't meeting the standard mastery of the standard?
You're on this slide right here.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good question. That's their language.
I don't understand that. And then 4, the standard exceeded demonstrates advanced progress toward mastery. I would interpret exceeding a standard as having mastered it and moved beyond.
I would agree with you. Let's hear from Mrs. Storm.
Oh, okay.
My hunch here is that for a long before they shortened the assessment, they would report out to us the different like subject bands within the assessment. So for English language arts, we would see how a student did in reading and how they did in writing and how they did in research. And they would always say, like the word isn't close, but approaching or met. They would never commit to like met. It was always this kind of like approaching or met. And part of that may be that, do you remember this, Mrs. Frame? And I'm fuzzy now because that was 2019, right? That's a whole lifetime ago. But I think that might be part of where that's coming from. And this was from that time period. So there was kind of there was a non-committal stance around.
So how do we interpret this though? do we interpret it as a student successfully meeting the standard?
Yes,
And having mastery
Yes.
of the standard?
yes, most definitely.
And then also on the state testing and the shortening of the state testing, it's state testing. So we accept what they give us, correct? Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. Okay. So what you'll see here in blue are our most recent spring 22 results. And then I'll remind you that we were one of the few districts, the only district in the county to do all grades 3 through 8 and 11. Some districts within the county did just 11 for other purposes, but no other district did 3 through 8 and 11. And those are green results in 21. So that would be the previous year. And so on the far left, you have all students, and you see about a 5% increase there, which is statistically significant according to researchers in terms of improvement. And the second set of bars is non-SED or socioeconomically disadvantaged students, and they grew by about 5%, the same 5%. But look at the next three groups of students. The socioeconomically disadvantaged students grew by 11.
I believe that would be
11 points. Yep. English learner students.
Is this our school board
It
CASP
is.
test?
Absolutely. This is your CAS test. And our redesignated fluent English proficient students, 7 points, all greater than our non-SED students and our overall students. So that is what closing the achievement gap looks like.
So Rick,
So
I
you
do
need
have a-
bigger gains in those groups than in the non-SED students. And
So-
that is what we see there in that slide.
I know one of the things that we talked about, and I don't remember whether it was, I think it was 2021. And I believe we were one of the only districts that gave the CASP.
Correct.
And that the CASP in some ways that year was truncated. Is that correct? So my question for you is, are
Yeah.
these fair comparisons?
Yeah.
Given that 2022 was the more traditional year for test administration than 2021 is?
This is a great point, Mr. Unger, and one we always need to keep in mind when we look at data, because there are always caveats, always things, filters that we need to go through. So you're right. The state did tell us, be careful by comparing the 21 data, the green data, to any other year, because you did have students opting out at a greater rate and different things like that. They said to be careful to not compare that green data to other districts, because you don't know what those other districts did in terms of students opting out and things like that. But as you'll see later, we still have not reached our pre-COVID numbers. And so, but it's just the point that I wanted to make is that, we did see growth, especially where we focused in our MTSS effort in our schools. Yeah.
So, you talked a little bit before about comparing to other districts, comparing to the state. And I get that, but talk about the amount of variables just
Right.
within our own county. It's huge. So for me, this chart is going to stick a whole lot. It's going to be more important to me than how we did compared to Pleasant Valley.
Right.
So just got to share that.
It's a valid point, Mr. Buckman. And again, we look at multiple measures. We don't depend on any one particular thing because there are so many variables. The SBAC test is given over a relatively short period of time. And there's a lot of factors that would influence how students do on a given test in that environment. The last slide was for English language arts, and this is for math. You'll also see that the RFEP and students with disabilities groups either maintained the same or declined very slightly. But we see growth within the other groups, the all student group, the non-socioeconomically disadvantaged, English learner, and socioeconomically disadvantaged.
Can I ask you another question?
Please.
So our students with disabilities group, does that include students who not only took the CASP, but took the CAW?
This would not
So
be
the
the
CAW
cause.
is
The
separately
CAW is separate.
reported from this. Okay,
Separately
thank you.
reported. Yep. This is students who took the regular SBAC. Okay, now this is a fairly complicated slide, but it has some really good information, and we wanted to share it with you tonight. With the green header across the top, those are all English language arts results. And with the blue header to the right, those two sets of charts separated by the gray line are the math results. So just looking at the graph on the left-hand side, the green one for English language arts, we see that in 2020, the state canceled the SBAC. So no one took the SBAC. That's that gray line. To the right of the gray line, you have the 2018 and 19, which were pre-COVID years, and where we were at in 2019 and the growth we made from 18 to 19 is there by site and by the district overall. And then on the left-hand side of the gray line, you have the 21 results, which are last year's, and then the year before, and then the 22 results, which are this last spring's results and the growth that we made. And that's where you can see that the district as a whole made 5% rate of growth on English language arts, and then each individual site's results are listed there. Title I sites in general had a greater presence of MTSS teams, and we see that borne out in the data, in the results of the data. Look at Baywood, look at Smith, Hawthorne. Those are significant numbers. Pacheco. Secondary schools as well. Pac Beach, Morro Bay High.
Mr. Mayfield, could I?
Please.
Because I forgot, in 2020, we were, the state did not have the tests, and we were all on distance learning. Was 2021 the hybrid where we started in distance and then we came back?
Correct. Yes.
So 2022 is the, with the in-person learning for the entire year, which has a significant bump. So do we also expect to see, because these are kind of that same percentage, because, these 2 years are anomalies, like one was kind of a hybrid and one was the return to full, time instruction year round. And
I do think it's going to take some time to even out and for us to see a more standard flow of results from year to year. As we talked about in our board study session, 5% is a significant rate of growth. And if we can get our schools, individual schools in our district to grow at that rate, that's significant, and we're happy with that.
Rick, I was reading, I think it was in the LA Times, but the student population is way down in LA Unified. Has our student population, and then I'm going to ask, did it affect this? Has our student population fluctuated or
not significantly?
Okay.
I think we did see some fluctuation. We had several hundred students attend independent study, 150 perhaps attend independent study. We did have some students go to other schools, some of the private schools around, especially during closure time. But I think our numbers are pretty stable, wouldn't you, Mr. Pinkerton? Back up where we were.
We dropped a few hundred kids during COVID.
Okay, but so that's not going to
In
affect,
that year, but not now.
not enough to affect these,
Not a huge
not
number.
enough to affect these results.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
You bet. And then on the right-hand side is maps, the same configuration. 2020, the assessment was canceled. Post-COVID on the left-hand side, and pre with growth on the right-hand side. And you see similar results, Smith 14%, Hawthorne 12, Monarch 10, Los Ranchos 11, Pacheco 15. This significant growth for those Title I sites. So very happy with that. There's a lot of data on this graph, and there's a lot of ways, and you all have brought up some great points tonight. There's a lot of ways you can look at it and a lot of things you can glean from it. As I mentioned, sites do a deeper dive into site-specific data, student-specific data by class, to kind of try and look at these puzzles and, why did our school score this way? What were the reasons why we increased so much, or what were the reasons why we went down slightly?
So this is very interesting. In my mind, and please correct me, we actually spend a lot of extra money at the Title I sites. We have a lot of extra money that comes to us. So if we look at this data and we say, well, the Title I's did really well, are there things that we're doing at the Title I sites that we could actually expand to, maybe using our current budget? So teaching methodology, something, because we might as well learn from it and expand at all the sites.
Yeah. Our MTSS initiative was significant.
Okay.
We brought up a principal on special assignment to oversee it, and hired lots of staff, and trained the staff very well. We had MTSS teachers at sites who were trained up here at Instructional Services, brought that training back to the academic intervention teachers, instructional aides who worked in those classes. It took up a large share of our COVID relief funds that were both from the state of California and the federal government. And we have pared back a little bit on that staffing this year as students have kind of recovered their learning. And we will be looking at paring back a little bit more. But there are lessons to be learned for sure in how we can deliver instruction. I think some of the learning things that we're learning from Dr. McDowell, who's helping us with learning sprints and monitoring students very closely over short periods of time to watch their growth, are effective strategies that we can use to, simulate or emulate some of the data gains that we've seen here.
Okay, thanks.
You bet. And then the California Science Test, or CAST, you'll see here by grade level. So all students on the left-hand side of the screen. And CAST was just kind of getting off the ground when COVID hit. There was a baseline year where no scores were reported. The state just administered the test to students, didn't give us any data back, said they just needed kind of a norming year to get that assessment going. And then the first year was right before COVID. So the CAST is one that we're going to have to watch as we move forward. But grade 5 there is that second bar graph, grade 8, and then the high school assessment on the far right-hand side. And this is the percentage of students who meet or exceed proficiency. And then looking at the CAST by student group, all students over 2 years, all students on the left-hand side, non-socioeconomically disadvantaged, socioeconomically disadvantaged, English learner, redesignated, fluent English proficient, and students with disabilities. The EL group, as I've mentioned to you before, always have to be careful with that group. As soon as those students score proficient, they move to the redesignated fluent English proficient group. They're taken out of that group. Okay, overall CAST, same as that previous slide by site. You see a 5-point gain for the district overall from 21 to 22. And then you see the site results there as well. It's given in grade 5 only at elementary level. Please.
So I'm just going to use, so for Pacific Beach, just how often does the student population sort of turn over?
Yeah.
I mean, is the comparison even valid at some point?
Yeah, it's a statistician would probably, really dig into that and say, I'm not so sure. The numbers fluctuate even within the school year. So at the beginning of the school year, you may have 30 students attending Pacific Beach, and by the end of the school year, 55.
Right.
When the assessments are given. The following year, half of that number may be back at the regular school. So it does fluctuate, and it would be very difficult to track that number and say, hey, we're going to, over 3 years, we're going to see this kind of growth, because you're dealing with different
So
students. and
you've
different
taught me something over the
circumstances.
years.
Right.
I must have stuck. Thank you.
You bet. And so just some conclusions to share with you. Overall, the district made statistically significant growth of 5% or more in both ELA and math. Socioeconomically disadvantaged English learner and redesignated fluent English proficient students made more growth than non-SED students in ELA, and SED outperformed non-SED students in math, at least in terms of growth. Growth over the majority of school sites, 12 out of 15 sites made growth in ELA and 13 of 15 in math. And then significant growth at 9 sites in English language arts and 8 in mathematics. Overall growth on the California Science Test of 5%. As I mentioned earlier, we do, however, remain below our pre-COVID numbers, and we're working our way back towards those, and then we'll exceed those in the future and as we move forward. And of course, a significant achievement gap persists between non-socioeconomic disadvantaged students and the other subgroups that we continue to work on. Okay, so that's my SBAC presentation for tonight, and I'd be more than happy to answer any questions.
Let's
Any
go to the
further
public.
questions?
Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the board on this item? Okay, seeing no one. Any other board? Ms. Dobler-Drew?
Yes, it doesn't sit quite well for it to say that I understand that it's talking about growth, but to say that the non-SED outperformed that, I mean, what does it say there on that slide?
Yeah, it does say outperform them. You're right. And not in
So we
terms
should
of
add the
growth.
words in growth
Okay.
there, really.
Happy to do so. Good point.
Mrs. Frame?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment that this is really one data point, one data point in time. And that the growth that our students achieved, I just want to give a shout out to our staff because as Mrs. Storm commented about, it's that day-to-day work that our teachers are putting in, the above and beyond. And so the entire team, DO office and what our teachers are doing every day in the classroom has really kind of led to kind of these success stories. So I'd like to give a shout out to, all our staff for that great work. So thank
Totally
you.
agree. You're absolutely right. This is a result of a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, almost literally. And our staff did do a tremendous job last year to help these kids recover their learning. So absolutely, great point. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And I guess just from my perspective, I know there are people that say that learning, in some ways, learning loss was a figment of our imagination. There's that argument that we shouldn't call it that, but the fact is it's true. We saw significant learning loss, especially among our subgroups from the effects of the COVID and distance learning. And the fact that several of our schools have not only shown significant growth, but actually have exceeded their pre-COVID numbers is really, as Mrs. Frame said, a testament to the hard work that folks in our district are doing. So to
Agreed.
everyone, thank you.
Agree. We'll get back there and beyond. Yeah.
So I think that's it.
I just want to thank you for your hard work too. It's really shows in all of this. Thank you. I mean, the care and the meticulous measuring of every single student really shows.
We have
the
an
care.
awesome team. I appreciate you saying that. We have an awesome team in instructional services, K-12, that works very hard on putting all this stuff together and overseeing the initiatives under the direction of the executive cabinet. So thank you. Appreciate that.
Okay, how about item number 10.04, approval of the 2021-2022 consolidated application. Mr.
Yes.
Mayfield, you're
Thank
back
you.
at it.
The consolidated application is a yearly event, usually takes part in two different pieces. There's a winter iteration of the Khan app in which we verify our official enrollment numbers from the fall and things like that and submit our numbers to the state of California. And then there's a spring version of the consolidated application where we actually apply for federal funds for the following year. I'm not sure of what the circumstances were or why, but the state postponed the spring consolidated application until now. It opened on July 1st. I thought it was an interesting date to open something like the consolidated application, but they opened it on July 1st and it closes in about a week and a half, I think 10 days. So it needs to be approved by the board every year. This is our application for federal consolidated funds, titles 1, 2, 3, and 4. We do not qualify for migrant funds as we don't have the requisite number and percentage of students within our district. This is a yearly thing, and it does need to be brought in front of the board and approved by the board before it's finalized with the state in about 10 days.
Anybody from the public that would like to address the board on this item? Okay, is there any comment from board members? Otherwise, would someone like to make a motion? Okay, the motion by Mrs. Sheffer, second by Mrs. Roger. Any further discussion? Seeing none, Mrs. Frame?
Yes.
Sorry. Let's try. I try to do this in an order. Mrs. Sheffer. Mrs. Roger.
Yes.
Mrs. Frame.
Yes.
Mr. Buckman.
Yes.
Ms. Dobler-Drew. Dr. Eisendrath Rogers. And I'm a yes. Motion carries 7-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And now the item we've all been waiting for, and I see,
Well, everyone's left, right? So it's good that
I
we.
see Mrs. Eklund is back. Thank you. This is actually an important item. I shouldn't make
It's a very
light of
important item.
light of our
A very important item. All these
unaudited
things we're talking
actuals,
about,
actually.
right? Yeah. I got it. I got it. You want to just read off of this or you want to go off of that?
Yeah, it doesn't really matter. Okay. Oh, I have to move it for them, right? Okay. So unaudited actuals. This year, as you can see from this chart, oh, they can't see, can they? Where I'm pointing. Anyway, from the chart, if I move this, do they see? Do you guys see this? Okay, just want to make sure so you can see where I'm speaking to. Hey, why? Oh, there. Now I can read it. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay. So this year for unaudited actuals, at estimated actuals, we expected to receive $120 million in revenue, and we received 119. The major changes with that were we had a lot of deferred revenue in federal. For the ESSER funds, we didn't expend them all. We budgeted them all at the beginning of the year, or as they're received, we were expected to budget them, but we did not spend them. So we will be deferring those into 22-23, where we expect to fully spend up the ESSER funds. We had some special education funds that were a little higher than previous years that are multi-year funds that are from COVID. The other area that we had excess revenue, we received more at the end of the year than anticipated, was we received some special ed preschool funding that was a little over $525,000. And we received ethnic studies, which came in at late June. It was part of the governor's budget, and they sent us the funds before year end. So that will be carried over into next year. And local revenue, we received more than we expected in donations and tuition between what we received from Cayucas and Coast was a little bit higher than anticipated. But overall, we still had less revenue come in than what we had expected. Estimated actuals for expenditures.
I was going to say, you guys, I think, did a pretty darn good job. If you're $400,000 out of $120 million, that's pretty darn good.
That's,
Thank you.
yep. And I'd like to second that. And I'm just trying to figure out how you also spent $800,000 less than you budgeted, or something like that. I mean,
No, that
we spent
wait.
nearly $800,000 less just on equipment.
Where are you at? Oh, down there. Okay. Yep, right there. That was a bus that has not come in yet. The bus has come in. Yes, so we did not. We did not.
I take it back.
Yeah.
I hope it was a used bus.
Yeah, the bus has not come in. So with the salaries, that one was a little bit trickier. You can see that that came in higher than estimated actuals because we have a lot of right now hourly certificated staff for summer school, the first part of summer school, and some of our AIT teachers. So that one was a little hard to predict. Classified's a little bit easier to get closer on, and then the benefits that correlate with that. Supplies, they came in lower. That's to be expected because, again, when we receive categorical funds, we have to budget the revenue and we budget expenditures. So it's a net zero to the bottom line. So we didn't spend all of our books and supplies. Operating expenses, there was, we had equipment there that was delayed and did not come in. So we rolled the purchase orders into the next year. So overall, we in the end ended up spending more, but the bulk of it was due to salaries and benefits. This is something that did not point out last year, and I don't believe it was the year before because it wasn't material, but it's something I wanted to point out this year. We have to do a fair market value for our cash in our county treasurer. And we have a lot more cash this year with the county treasurer, especially in our general fund due to all the COVID funding and special ed funding we'd received. So we have to value that. And when we did that, or I did that, that calculation, we had an adjustment downward of our cash of $900,000. So the way that makes it look, so that's why I'm showing you with the journal entry and then without it. Had we not had to make that adjustment, we would have ended the year positive $220,000. Instead, we're negative $686,000 on June 30th. On July 1st, I reverse it. And so it's really just booking it in an accounting GASB that we have to follow, GASB 31. But if as far as revenue and expenses, we were positive.
Okay, so I thought the dollar was worth $1.
Yeah, I did too, but
Okay.
GASB did not. And
Okay.
it's just the market of your investments and what they're.
I appreciate that, but this makes me wonder now. I mean, I think it's Brazil or somewhere that's going bankrupt. Somewhere, and I mean, how secure is our money then? Is this something that it's all over at the county?
Right.
All right, their government.
Yeah, I would say it's probably more secure than a bank.
Yeah, but we'll never reach, GAN limit. Okay, it's more secure than the bank. All right. I mean, I just, anyway, this was a very interesting addition
And
it was eye-opening.
Yeah. Sure, it's $20,000. It wasn't material. It wasn't worth mentioning. And again, remember, this is just as June 30th. I reversed that transaction July 1st. So our fund balance goes back up. So we had categorical funds left over. I just kind of want to point out what those were. We had 2.4 in COVID. We had some expanded learning opportunity money. And we always keep 1 year of lottery, restricted lottery and unrestricted lottery. We keep each year 1 year's worth. We had special education funds. A lot of that was due to new COVID funds that came in. It was not our AB 602, which is our state special ed funds, or our IDEA. Our normal allocation we spent, but we did receive some add-on one-time monies from federal special education that we have not spent yet. Educator effectiveness, we have not spent that, but we have a plan, and that will be used in 22-23. We had unrestricted carryover, again, 1 year's worth of lottery. We had some miscellaneous discretionary accounts. And then we have site and department carryover, which is basically donations for various sites. At the end of the fiscal year, we transferred in 143,000 from Fund 20, and that's to cover the STRS audit. Other things to point out is the district continues to have the 10% reserve for economic uncertainty. Our staffing ended the year at 82% of total expenditures, which is our target between 82 and 84%. And the next page, this is a breakdown. You can see estimated actuals, and where we're budgeted. The only thing sorry, go ahead.
I know you're going really fast, and I know you're trying to get us. Sounds like you're trying to get us home, but it's okay. So I
Sorry.
appreciate it. I understand that the state requires 3%. I understand that we have 10%, but with the cost of stuff going up as fast as it is going, it's 10%. I'm wondering whether my budget's gone up more than 10% at home. So is 10% enough at this
School
point in
Services
reserve?
recommends for basic aid district to be anywhere between 10 and 17%.
Oh. Yeah, that's very interesting. Okay, thanks. I thought it was 3%. Great.
3% is the state requirement for districts of certain size, and if you're LCFF.
Must be one of the districts I work for. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
On this is just the big picture of kind of the little breakdowns we've gone through. But what I wanted to point out on the 22-23 is you'll see the state jumped way up, and that was the one-time money we had gotten from the governor at budget development is in there, and that's the 24, and that's why it's such all the other ones are relatively about this, little small increase, little decrease, but that one really jumped out to me. So I just wanted to kind of mention that. Then that explains all the different boxes, but here's the last is all of our other funds. So you can see the general fund and our deficit of $600,000. Adult ed did great this year. They started out at 345,000 and they ended with 600,000. So they brought in some more revenue than they spent. And Fund 13, we're still getting funded for every student that eats a meal. We're bringing in 4.7 million. We spent 400,000. We started the year with a healthy fund balance and we keep adding to that. And Erin is buying some equipment that got deferred into this year due to shipping and also looking at staff. So I know she has a plan to kind of spend that down. On Fund 20 and Fund 21, again, the negatives there are for June 30th. That's fair market value. We have to do it for every fund that we have. And so again, it was noticeable in those two particular funds, not so much in the rest. I mean, the Fund 40 also had a negative fair market value.
Mrs. Eklund, could you define fair market value for me?
That was when we, on June 30th, had money in the county treasurer. We have to say what the percentage, the interest or not interest rate, what is that rate called? I don't know what the rate is, but we get a rate from the county treasurer that I think it is an interest rate. And we have to say what we do a calculation on based on the Gatsby rules, what is in the county treasurer and what on June 30th we held in cash. And that's the fair market value of our money sitting in the county treasurer. If we didn't go into July 1st, our money wouldn't be worth as much. And it fluctuates based on the market. It's based probably on the investments and the way the county is investing our money.
So we had been
Or
receiving, I'm going back a few years now, 1% in the county treasury.
And I
Is that
think-
about what we're?
Yeah, it was a
receiving
little
now?
higher than that, but it's roughly around there, 1.5.
And we traded off security. I mean, a greater return for the security of the investment.
So what I would say, a couple of things I'll tie into this. So, what the way to think of it is, again, we do earn interest by having our money in the county treasury. Could we put all that money into a checking account and just have $34 million and earn no interest on it and have it be, extremely safe? Yes, we could do that. But we, it's just like your IRA, it's your 401k, it's those types of things. I think basically if everyone took all of their money out of the county treasury today, that's the 97%, right? But that's not going to happen. So that's why, but again, at today's value, right? Stock markets decline some over time. They do invest money from the county treasurer. I mean, you're talking, I'll get it for you, but we're talking like $1 billion, right? Compared to the 34 million we put in. So this is all the school districts, counties. You're talking about a huge sum of money, and they are, again, our county compared to most, super safe, super secure in terms of their investments, but they're still investments. They're still, that's how we earn interest. That's how we make money on those, right, over time. So this was kind of a new one in terms of actually having to report it right. Again, we took out $880,000 and on July 1, we put it right back in. So it's kind of a shell game, is basically based, this audit rule that we have to follow. So you're going to see it taken out of this budget and you're going to see it right back in when we do first interim.
Okay, thank you.
So
you can see.
yeah.
Thank you.
I would
And
just,
a couple other ones that I've,
excuse me,
go ahead,
Brian,
sorry.
I would just, as people think about this, I would just remind people of Orange County, 1990, 1991.
But ours is super, I mean, I can have him come speak to, they're super, super safe, secure in terms of the investments that they do. They're not buying real estate, doing things that Orange County did, right here in San Luis County. And I can have our county treasurer come in and share information about the investments and the safe and secure, aspect of it. So if the board, whatever, want that to kind of get that that sense of it. So out of these other funds, I just want to highlight food service. Okay. So that is the one like money maker for a school district, right? Now we can't use that to pay for teachers. So all of that money has to be invested back into food service. We literally cannot hire enough people right now to spend the money, right? That's one of the issues. And Erin and her team has done such a great job. So many kids are eating that they're getting these large reimbursements. So it's fantastic. But I got to tell you, Erin has been working at a site, Ann has been working at a site every day. I've served breakfast several times. I've taken lunch to PB. I think, for over the course of a week, like we're all kind of chipping in, but our food service team they're running ragged. So they're trying to hire more people, add more. Erin's trying to add more staff. And all that does, right, is that just means the more staff we have for food service anyways, the better the food is, which means more kids eat, which it's just a super positive thing, but it's been really tough. And so again, they have this strong budget. We're putting some money into the equipment, like at the 2 comprehensive high schools that would have been Measure D. So this is offsetting those, right? So that we can put more money into other projects throughout the district. So again, kudos to Erin and her staff for that. You're only allowed to keep a certain amount. So Katie has to each year, kind of tie in with the state. We have to do a spending plan and how we're going to spend it and how we're going to move forward, right? So Erin has to do that with her. So they put that together in terms of moving forward. So that was the one that I wanted to highlight out of all of the extra funds outside the general fund. Again, we received at the very kind of end of the day, right before the governor's budget, about $11.5 million in one-time funds. So fantastic, great, excellent. And you're going to see in the 10-year budget, it makes one year look really, really good, right? And you receive those types of funds. So again, we go through, as the board knows, in our 10-year budget, we have our basic rep. What's that? Yeah, I can answer any other questions on Katie's presentation if you can. It all kind of blends together, so I was just going straight into it, but if that's okay. Oh,
The only,
yeah, go
sorry,
ahead.
Ellen.
How about Marilyn and then Ellen?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. I spoke over you.
No, I was just saying, I was inquiring as to whether or not we moved to the 10-year budget because that's a different screen for me and I needed to get out.
Oh, okay. Okay. I just wanted to comment on the fact that adult ed is doing so well. I think it.
Coming back together.
Yeah.
Right.
yeah,
COVID was really tough on them.
Yeah.
We
and I-
put some money in the LCAP to help adult ed, but they've done a really good job. And
Right. So I think it also speaks to the work that Leslie's doing there.
absolutely.
It's
his
that's
team.
really encouraging.
Yeah. So again, when we look at our revenue, LCFF state funded districts received a huge increase this year. Huge increase. Which is great for them. Terrific, right? But also that when the base goes up higher, that also means supplemental funds are higher for them. So you're going to see state aid districts around us getting large amounts of increases this year as we move forward. Now we did as well in some of those with the one-time money received. Mind you, they received the giant large LCF and the one-time money, kind of like we did, right? So again, great for them, good for those districts. And it really is assisting us to kind of get through this, again, the additional staff we've brought on with COVID, those types of things. We are a people business and most of our costs are personnel, which makes it really, really tough to reduce your budget. Because when you reduce, we can turn off the lights a little bit. We can try to save, energy costs, trash costs, those types of things, but it's people at the end of the day. So we're in a good place right now at the 82.4% that Katie talked about. We'll be okay for the next 2 years. But then what you'll see as we go through, you start to have issues, right? In terms of the revenues that we've come in versus the expenses. 2 key things, right? So again, property tax growth is the first. I am hopeful that Diable Canyon staying open potentially for 5 years. I don't see that our unitary tax is going to grow over the next 5 years. I don't think they're gonna revalue the plan, say that it means it, it's really worth a lot more now. And we're gonna get more unitary tax. My hope, honestly, is that it levels and they don't cut it another 2 million. And that we will, as a school district, actually receive the property tax increase that's really happening with properties around us, right? So we would have had a 5% property tax increase had we unitary not dropped $2 million last year. Right. Instead, we had a 2% increase. So I'm hopeful in November that we'll see what happens, right? Again, as a basic aid school district, the board passes a budget in June, right? We don't really find out what our true revenues are going to be until November, December,
But
when we
also,
actually get our taxes.
so,
Yes.
but we're kind of, even if Diablo stays open the 5 years, we're sort of right back into that. Oh, we've got 5 more years of whatever, the $2 million, but then it's just going to go away in 5
Let's come into
years.
that next.
I'm
right?
good, aren't I?
So
Okay.
that's so property tax is one, right? So that's one for us to look at to see what's going to happen in December this year. It'll be really interesting to see how that unitary drop or not, or what happens in terms of that. I know Katie's reached out to the county. We haven't really heard from them yet in terms of that the county is having a hard time just assessing properties and getting those tax assessment rolls going right. I mean, there's just a lot of building in San Luis Obispo in particular. So I'm hopeful that that's going to help this 10-year budget long term. But that's a hope, right? And most of us don't do our budgets on hope. So the other one is really to really point out is the Diablo Canyon DC, our settlement, right? To SB 1090. So again, we have 3 more years really of 4.6 million. It pops back up. Foundation's got their 10 million to go now. The rest of those dollars come to the school district, right? But you'll see that's a rather large drop then in future years when that happens. Okay. So you see this really radical $136 million revenues. And that is what I said. That's the 11.5 million one-time dollars we received. Okay. And that you'll see at our bottom line. That's the only thing that's really saving us over the next 2 years. We brought on a lot of staff with COVID using COVID funds. And so that's something it's a board priority, right? To have that conversation. What's working? What are we going to keep? What's really actually working with kids? And so I think that's why these presentations that the board, listen to today is going to really impact your decision when it comes, budget time in the spring again. So STRS, goes without saying, those increases are really tough because you have the same people, but they just cost a lot more. I'm really, really concerned about healthcare costs. SIS came back last month. I think they were like $10 million over budgeted with another month to go. So that's a concern for me, both as a school district, because we pay for 50% of that. And we've increased to 6,000 for employees, for our classified employees, but also for our employees. So that goes up, that they're also paying more. So that's one I'm really, I could see it like a major increase coming potentially in another year because of things that are happening just with healthcare and throughout. So we'll see we'll see what happens. And so you'll see we have this large surplus projected at this time, right, for this year. But then you have a $6 million deficit, $7 million deficit. It spends those one-time dollars really rapidly. So we have about 2 years now to make that balance. Again, I'm hopeful in November that we're going to see better than our projected property taxes, but we'll see. Right. It's a kind of a balance point for me where I try not to be complete naysayer, tough, cut everything right now. Right. Versus, I have to, I'm in charge of the budget. So I still have to be realistic and really, again, it's the people aspect that we're going to have to look at as we move forward. So
But Ryan, I'm sorry. I understand that you don't want to cut the budget now, but it looks like we're going to be facing something. So with your expertise, would it be better to cut slowly or have to do it all, let's say, in 1 year?
Yeah, no, definitely slowly, right?
Okay.
So I would say, this coming year, this is something we'll
Okay.
have to have a conversation about. And I would think that that conversation would probably happen in December, right? That we'd begin to have that conversation through the LCAP, through the budget process and begin to talk about those things. We've kept class sizes low. We've added a lot of support at our school sites, both with aides, both with AITs. We've had district office support. We've, a lot of things that we've done, which has all been great and helped the student achievement and helped us with COVID and bringing kids back on, right? So those are going to be things we're going to have to balance as we move forward. Again, I'm hopeful. It's interesting. The state economy is still kind of holding in, right? I think for like 4 years, I said we were going to go into a recession and we never went into a recession. So I don't even talk about that anymore. We'll see what happens, right, with the economy. But if that happens, if something major happens, everyone's going to suffer for that, right? We'll all be together in it. So you can see we do have a couple of years, right, where we need to kind of get things back in line, I would say, in terms of revenues and expenses. But man, those one-time dollars we received this year, I mean, really, really, really help us in terms of moving forward. And again, we'll see what happens November, and we'll start to make those decisions. So we'll update this at first interim. Hopefully by then we'll kind of have that idea of where our property taxes are going to be and have a better idea in terms of moving on in the future, right?
Ryan?
Yep.
I've got a question. It's going to have to go to Chris. We transitioned.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I didn't know I was being funny.
Go ahead. No, please.
This questions have to go to Chris first. We transitioned pretty quickly between Katie's and to this
Yeah.
tenure. I have a line item question, and
Okay.
I can maybe do it somewhere else,
It's
but
right here.
okay. Let me just find it. So basically, we're doing paras through a company now. Add it.
So
This line item is, I think it's 230942. It's Sunbelt Staffing. So I looked it up.
Yep.
And that's the para
Mhm.
system, and it's $245,000.
Mhm.
So that's annual? Or is it a
Well, it
10-year
depends on
contract?
it depends on, so what's happened is we haven't been able to find enough paraeducators.
Right.
And so why they can't come on our system and fill out the EdJoin form and have us hire them and they get benefits and all those things, I don't know. But so through a company, we've enlisted their support, right? We can, that's a monthly benefit. So we can,
Wait.
no, not cost, not that cost. I'm just saying the company itself, the workers that we hire, that's a monthly thing that we can stop at any time. So if we find more paraeducators through our personnel HR department, we can just stop that contract and that can be done. Right. So, but I mean, 240,000 is not, honestly, I mean, that's maybe 6 paraeducators, right? I mean, it's not a lot when you think of, again, those personnel costs and you add stirs and pers and everything else that goes into it. So the cost isn't so much. I would prefer that they would be our employees. Right. So that's one of the things we've talked about with our HR department with Dan is having some type of a secretarial position where they would just help people come in and do the application. Like if that's what's holding people up from, coming in, then we should assist them. We should help them do it. We should, be careful of asking people for 3 letters of rec at a, starting position, those types of things, right? Where we may be alienating people. So those are things we're looking at in terms of internally to find people. And then we're also kind of assessing the people we're getting from that company.
Right.
And so is that good or bad? Right. And, in terms of the people that come on, we can pay a fee at the end of the year to that company to keep the employee, have them become ours. So there's things that go into the contract, but we can at any time in that.
Okay. And when it comes to the liability, do they assume liability for
They
their
do.
people
Yep.
on our campuses?
Including workers' comp. Yep.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So Mrs. Dawson, is there anyone from the public who would like to address us on this item? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for board discussion or a motion or both. Would someone like to move item 10.05?
Yeah, I'll move approval of 10.05.
And I'll second.
We have a motion by Mark, a second by Marilyn. Any further discussion? Okay, Mark,
Yes.
Marilyn, Eve, Catherine, Evelyn, Ellen, and I'm a yes. Motion carries 7-0. We have several items that are proposed revisions to board policy. Mrs. Frost.
Yes, starting with Board Policy 4030, non-discrimination in employment. This is a mandatory policy, a mandatory review. There are limited changes to this policy. It does require that an employee may not be required to sign a release to their right to file a claim, and we must maintain files for 4 years. I do recommend that this comes back for a second reading.
Okay, is there any objections to having this come back for second reading? Okay, thank you. Let's see if there's anybody from the public on 10.06. No, 10.07.
Thank you. Board Policy 5111. This is mandatory again, and it is on admissions. Again, we have minor changes here, enrollment and appropriate placement of students, and then informing parents about assisting with the enrollment process if they need that. I do recommend this comes back for a second reading.
Okay, thank you. Mrs. Dawson, anybody from the public? Nope. Is there any objection to bringing this back for a second reading? Okay, we'll bring it back for a second reading, 10.08, I believe.
Thank you. This is Board Bylaw 9220, and this is governing board elections. It's a revision, and it says when discussing eligibility as a board member, we must add resident of the trustee area up for reelection. So it's a very minor change. I do recommend, because of timeliness, that we approve this revision to 9220 this evening.
First of all, Mrs. Dawson, anybody from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board for discussion. Or would someone like to make a motion? I think they pretty much think we have to do it. So, you know what, I'll go ahead and make the motion.
And I'll second.
Thank you. So we have a motion by me and a second by Marilyn. So any further board discussion on this item? Okay. Marilyn? Mark?
Yes.
Ellen? Eve? Catherine? Evelyn? And I'm a yes. Motion carries 7-0. And I'm gonna, hold on, give me just a second here. I have to do some bookkeeping. Okay, 10.09.
Thank you. So this is Board Bylaw 9270, and this is conflict of interest. It discusses conflict with duties as an officer of the district. We are required to review this every 2 years. There are no changes to this at all. It just requires your review and approval, and I recommend that we approve it this evening.
Okay. Mrs. Dawson, anyone from the public? Okay, I'll bring it back to the board. Does anybody have an interest in doing a second reading on this, or would someone like to make a motion? That was Eve, Evelyn. Oh, hold on just a second. Okay. And Ellen was the second. Any further discussion? Okay. Evelyn? Ellen? Marilyn? Catherine? Eve? Mark?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Motion carries 7-0. That brings us to our action consent agenda. Please let me know if you want an item pulled. Hold on just a second while I gather myself here. 11.01. 11.01, approval of certificated and classified personnel items. 11.02, acceptance of donations. 11.03, approval of field study trip requests. 11.04, approval of furniture and equipment requests. 11.05, approval of purchase orders and CalCard purchases. 11.06, approval of minutes, August 16th, 2022. 11.07, disposal of surplus. 11.08, authorizing continued use of remote teleconferencing provisions pursuant to AB 361 and Government Code Section 54953. And 11.09, proposed revisions to Board Policy 6145, extracurricular and curricular activities. This is a second reading. 11.10, proposed new Board Policy 6164.41, children with disabilities enrolled by parents in a private school, also a second reading. So we have, would someone like to make a motion for 11.01, 11.02, and 11.04 to 11.09?
I move approval of 11.01 through 11.10, exclusive of 11.03.
Okay. Was 11.01, 02, 042, 10. Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Okay, we have a motion by Marilyn and a second by Catherine. Any further discussion? Okay, Marilyn, Catherine, Mark.
Yes.
Eve, Evelyn, Ellen, and I'm a yes. Motion carries 7-0. Mark, you pulled 11.03.
Yeah, I took a look at this to just see where this where the kids were going. And so I went to the Zephyr Point webpage, and it just slowed me down for a minute. And I actually ended up talking to Diane about it, and Diane, I guess, will fill us in on it. But this is the mission statement for this location. Zephyr Point Presbyterian Conference Center is inviting all to experience God through education and exploration. And it slowed me down because I'm trying to think of all this separation of church and state. I dug deeper and deeper and deeper, and it got more and more, religious. But Diane, can you just kind of help me here? Because I'm not going to be not going to protest too much.
Yeah, I'm absolutely happy to. Thank you. I did talk to Mr. Bellier. He's the high school music teacher from Morro Bay High School who submitted this field trip form. And he has gone to this particular site in Nevada, in Tahoe, several years, starting in 2015. It is a Presbyterian retreat, like I guess conference center, but they welcome groups outside of the faith of all sorts of organizations. And like I said, Mr. Bellier has been there with his group a number of times. He says there is no religious content at all when he is taking their students. They are 100% committed to their music, committed to composition. They oftentimes have a composer, a visiting composer who joins them, but he sees no religious, I guess, focus at all on the trip that he takes the kids on. He says it is a beautiful opportunity, a beautiful conference center for the kids and the chaperones who go with them. I would say that there are a couple of places that students go throughout the state of California that might be owned by a religious organization, but offered out to groups across the state. You've got Mount Hermon in Santa Cruz. You've got Granite Ridge right up here in Creston, excuse me. So there are places like this where public school students are welcome, and we have experience with Zephyr Point in particular.
So with that explanation, I'd like to move approval of 11.03.
And I'll second that. Is there any, first of all, I need to go to the public on this. Is there anyone from the public that would like to address the board on this? Seeing none, I'll bring it back. Is there any further board discussion on this? Okay, Mark?
Yes.
Eve? Catherine? Evelyn? Marilyn, Ellen, and I'm a yes. Motion carries 7-0. That brings us to 12.02 advanced agenda. Is there any advanced agenda? Okay, let's go to 13.01 reports by board members. Do we have any reports by board members? Yes, Eve.
Oh, well, just enjoyed going to the Los Ranchos boardwalk and looking forward to more boardwalks. And also, I missed most of the back to school nights because I was in quarantine. But I understand that the Pac Beach one is going to be September 28th, but it was printed out as September 1st. So I got that straightened out with Chris Dowler. So I don't want you all to miss it because of that misprint.
Thanks. Anybody else?
I got some.
Mark?
Yeah, so it's been a while since the last time I had to tell you guys everything that I've done. So I did get to 3 back to school nights. Hawthorne, Laguna Middle School, and Pacheco. The energy level was just so exciting. I just went home. I didn't sleep for 2 days. Kids were excited, and then I was watching the teachers arrive at Hawthorne, and they were all holding some kid's hand or talking to some kid. And I asked somebody, evidently Hawthorne has the largest number of teachers that bring their kids to school with them. And the kids actually attend school where their parent attends. And I thought that was just so cool. I also went to the boardwalk with Ms. Dobler-Drew. It was absolutely amazing. We went to the innovation lab, and the kids were told to make a tower. First of all, the teacher, I can't remember his name at the innovation lab. Anybody? Christian. And anyway, this guy was just amazing. And he's he's working towards this being a teacher. And I guess we took the gamble on him.
AIDS.
And he's just amazing. Anyway, Mr. Torres, great guy. He had them making towers out of raw spaghetti, right? And they had to take the tower, make a tower that could stand up. Then they had to take spaghetti and make a radio, like an antenna. And then they had to stick a marshmallow on the top of that. So the innovation that was going on, was amazing. And I guess nobody ever told the kids that they had to use a whole marshmallow. They just had to put marshmallow on the top. So some of the kids took like this little teeny piece of marshmallow and put it on top, and their antenna stayed up. It was great. I talked about that. I think I'll just go with that. That's great. Anyway.
I just want to add to that. Or are you still talking? Because I thought you were signing off there. Mark.
I'm off for the night.
That a colleague of mine from before I retired in 2018 that I taught with in Lucia Mar has just been hired over at Los Ranchos, Laura Flessner. I was really happy to see her there. She's a joy to be with.
She was my daughter's 6th grade teacher last year.
And she survived.
He left the district, Ryan. What is that?
Yeah.
But she said it's because it was closer to home up here.
Well, and I just want to say I was able to go to Baywood and Los Osos Middle School on the first day. It was great to be there. I did a little visit at Del Mar, and I talked to Mrs. Slavin's class about what a school board does. I have this particular little lesson thing I do with them. And I actually got a question from one of her students later, which is what are the qualifications for being on a school board? Interestingly enough. And so I sent them a copy of the old board policy, not our new board policy. And then I was able to go to both the Del Mar and Monarch Grove back to school nights. And Mrs. Roger and I were at Del Mar. It was a great night. And by the way, to kind of what we're doing here at Del Mar, Mr. Roski's class was also doing the spaghetti challenge. So I think what's great is what we're seeing is the use of the innovation labs and the lessons throughout the district in different classrooms. So that's really good news to hear too. Anything else from anybody?
Yes.
Yes, Mrs. Roger, I'm sorry.
I would just add to having gone to the Del Mar back to school night, I also attended the Morro Bay High School back to school night and the Baywood back to school night, and they were both wonderful. Morro Bay was a little different this year. There was no group presentation. People, Mr. Scaldi sent out a video for everyone to watch. It's late. I can't formulate my thoughts well. That introduced the new staff, and then back to school night, parents showed up and just simply began going to their students' classrooms. So I went around and Dr. Prater was kind enough to escort me because he was there also, and we just popped into a few classes and it was great. Thank you. I'm done.
Anybody else? Okay, thank you. We will see you all in a couple of weeks. Thank you.